I've decided that it's now time to share my story. I don't want to be one of those people where I have lots of stories and things to tell people and share, but I never get round to it in my life. That wouldn't be a good thing. I'm kind of setting myself up to fail if I have that approach, I think, so I just get down to what's important, really. Yeah, I'm worried that I'll die and my stories will go with me. To be honest, for a long time, I didn't want to tell too many people too many of the things that I'd experienced because, even if it's as plain as day, they'll say, oh, you're just seeing things or you're just trying to make out something that's not really there. It's kind of annoying, really. But yeah, I know I've not got that many years left to live. I've had a good life, and I guess one that eventually found a lot of happiness in. So for my job, for quite a while, I actually used to have to go out and rescue people. Every so often, people would wander off into the woods basically and become completely lost out in the snow, and it was my job to go and rescue them. Well, there was a few other people that we worked with in the teams, and I'd like to share some of the weird experiences that we had, and some things that I saw that I think might be interesting to you all. So let me cast you back now. We're sitting at the station, and we don't have any call-ups, so we go home. We are actually able to get contacted while at home though, so we knew it wasn't completely being out in the clear. I mean, basically you had to be close enough to the job that you could actually go back if you needed to actually go and make a difference with things. So I get back home, and it's one of those drives where that I kind of need the time just to think clearly. Like the nighttime drives people do. I think I used any time that I was driving just to sit and reflect in silence. I found a lot of peace from doing this, really. So yeah, that's how I was getting on with things. Now, after not too long of doing this, I get back home and I feel quite happy. I get in though and realise that the heatings went off, but that doesn't matter. I can start the fire, so I quickly go outside to get some wood and things, and I start doing that. While I'm out there, I'm met by another person. I say, hey, how are you? Just trying to be nice. I realise that he hasn't replied, and I look up again, and that person is gone. I think that's odd. I thought maybe it was a new neighbour who was just nervous about being there or something. I don't know, people get weird though sometimes. Especially when you live in a place where there aren't too many other people around. I don't know why, it's just an opportunity for some people to be quite weird, I guess. So anyway, I get the wooden things that I need and I just start cracking on. I head back inside and I start making my fire. It's quite a nice one. I go lay down in my chair and I wake up to a phone call. I open my eyes and the fire's quite big now. I'm kind of glad that I woke up. I need to tend to it and poke it back into place. The place that I live in isn't designed very well, and it's probably a big fire hazard. I think today you wouldn't be allowed to design things like this, but basically if you put enough wood into the fire and it becomes big enough and you don't control it, it kind of spreads out and it's quite close to the wooden floor. I'd actually seen it melt some things before and it wasn't very good. So after doing that, I quickly go over and pick up the phone. They say, hey, we got something we need you guys to come back for. Can you do it? I say, I don't know. I'm pretty exhausted at this point. I noticed that I was getting a strange feeling in my neck and feeling breathless, and it's one of the signs that I'm actually a bit exhausted. So with this in mind, I say, is there no one else that can do it? I know some people are probably thinking, oh, that's not a kind and caring person, but honestly, if you're to do a job like this and you understand that, yes, you give your life to this thing, but you also get exhausted from it. I think burnout with these kinds of jobs is very common, and I was definitely feeling it that day. But they haven't got anybody else who can go out to help the team, so I kind of reluctantly agreed. So I now basically pack up all of my things and quickly put out the fire. I'm a bit anxious about putting out the fire though, to be honest. I just have a bad feeling this time. I don't know why, I just couldn't really shake it. But I get everything together and head off. I grab a newspaper because I know I'm probably going to be bored at some point during this and we're going to have breaks, so that's fine. Annoyed that I forgot my coffee, I curse a little bit but head into my truck and get going. The lighting seemed worse this time on the way back, but I put it down to the fact that I was most definitely tired at this point. I was just tired of all kinds of things really. I needed a break, but here I am, still going, still pressing forward, trying to tell myself that I'll get a break soon. But I just keep on and on getting called out, and it's just not good enough. But hey, I signed the dotted line, nobody had me at a knife point doing so I go. It's probably good it was a bit of a drive for me to get there, because I think this definitely helped calm me down in the process. Yeah, I needed that really, just to be able to calm down enough to actually get out and start to do things. So yeah, I feel a bit better when I actually arrive back, and we get the download. Apparently somebody is injured out there. They might even have thought that a bear attacked them or something. They had reports of screaming and then some blood trails, but that was all they knew. I think to myself, great. Is this it? Is this the end? I was jokingly thinking of this unoptimistically to myself, but there was actually some truth to the sarcasm of which overcast my mind at that moment. I felt like I was kind of spellbound to have something bad happening. Do you ever get moments in your life where you feel like everything's playing out like it's some kind of movie or something, and you're just watching it play out in front of you, and you know things are going to happen but you don't have control of it? Yeah, it's kind of like that. The next thing I knew, I was out there. I'm walking up a snowy staircase. We basically have a staircase which leads us out into the part of the forest which is designated for us, the rescue workers. It's basically from here that we can go further and further in, much further than other people are allowed to go. In fact, when you get to the end, there's a sign saying stop, turn around, no civilians. Of course, I have to ignore this and just go through, so that's what I start doing. As I closed the gate and I turned around, I could swear that there was somebody who was standing at the very far end of where I'd come from, just kind of motionless. I thought maybe it was a civilian or something. I mean, civilians could come up to this point, so I didn't have a problem with it. But I thought, oh man, I just hope that there's nobody else to get lost out here. My self-talk was pretty atrocious at this point, but there wasn't too much of which I could do in particular to change it. So here I am, off I go, into the snow. The snowfall at this point was really beautiful. I should make note of that. When there's enough wind, it kind of just dusts off the top layer of snow, and it's really a beautiful thing. It kind of looked good here. I start to relax a bit and head off in the general direction. Now the thing is, we didn't really use radios. The technology wasn't so great at the time for these, at least where we were, because of the thick trees and stuff. But I didn't have an issue with this. I knew the area well, very well. In fact, that's how we were trained back then, to become expert navigators of the landscape, so that way we could go on regardless of not knowing exactly where we were, but having bearings and landmarks with us at all times. So that was fine. So I'm heading down and the wind picks up a bit with some snow. Every so often it's like my vision goes for a second because of the snow picking up. I start to think I've got to be really careful if there is a bear out here. I actually have a rifle on my shoulder, but the thing is I hadn't really shot one for a while. I wasn't so sure I knew exactly how to use it safely, and I wasn't sure it was a high enough caliber to take out a bear. I remembered one of my other colleagues telling me that if you get into a bear situation, just shoot it between the eyes. That's okay, but what if you miss, I thought. We had the bolt action one, so that's at least a second gone there in between rounds. Then, oh no, I haven't loaded it. I quickly put a few rounds in and put the safety off. This is probably the dumbest thing I did, because I had a loaded rifle which would occasionally point towards my head, but I didn't realise this until after the fact. So I'm walking round, and every so often I can hear a weeping kind of moan. I don't know what it is. It's definitely spooky though. I thought maybe there was an injured person around. I go to call out to ask if they want help, but I don't get a reply. I go to do it again, and furthermore there's no reply. So I'm just thinking to myself, well, I don't know what's happening now. I want to call out, but I can't for some reason. It kind of feels like I'm being stalked or hunted. Yes, that's it. The feeling of being hunted now. Gosh, it's well and truly not a nice feeling to have. This goes on for a little bit longer, and I'm now walking in somewhat deeper snow. I slip down a bit, but quickly steady myself, and I think I see something moving. There's some movement in the tree line, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Then I hear it. This time it kind of sounds like thunder or something, but there's no thunder above. Odd. It's kind of like if you've ever watched one of those really old horror films, and every so often they have the thunder and lightning and whatnot, and you're thinking, oh yeah, something bad's about to happen. But that was creepy. You know what, I'm gonna say it, that was the scariest moment of my life. Constantly hearing thunder of which I could not explain whatsoever. It was almost like there should have been something, but there just wasn't. And it kept happening every so often, almost like a monster was about to jump out and get me. But it didn't happen, so I press on. I'm going a bit further along now. And every so often parallel to me, I can see snow being disturbed on some of the trees. But I can never see what's the source of this. My presumptions, of which I believe are correct potentially, are that it's a fox or some kind of animal like that. I don't know. Just something. Well, I guess I tell myself that at the time just to try and make sense of this. But I don't know what these are. So I keep going. Then I see it. A very faint pinkish colour in the snow. It's going off of the area that I'm in, so I now make a diversion in order to follow it. I watch this for a little while, and it doesn't seem to be picking up much. Every so often it seems to be a bit more strong, but I now notice a strange yellowish colour in the snow too. So yeah, I keep going and just following this, and I realise that every so often there's a splotch of blood. Okay, that's not very good. I know something's definitely up now. I know I'm definitely getting close. The problem is, in this situation, I don't know for sure whether I'm actually hunting something or whether I'm actually finding a person. The problem is, in this kind of state of fear, you can be very likely to take shots or do things that you wouldn't in other circumstances. So I'm definitely a bit more anxious now than I probably should be. I'm just worried that I'm going to be trigger happy. I'm going to say it now, I'm probably the most trigger happy person in the world. Even if things made me jump while we're practicing on the gun range, I would always take a shot, almost an instinct. I decide to put the safety on now, and I take a round out, or two. I'm just worried that I'm just going to empty this clip and either run out of ammo or shoot a poor person who might already be injured. I've seen a car crash once, so I should be prepared for what I see, right? Well, I keep going. There was something extremely unsettling about following a blood trail like this. It almost feels like there's a picture being painted in front of you. You're basically following the breadcrumbs of some kind of monster. At least that's how I felt. I didn't notice it again until afterwards, but there's no footsteps to go with this blood. There just seems to be blood going further and further into the woods. It doesn't pick up enough though, and I'm still following it, and I've got to admit, I'm getting a bit annoyed now. I feel like, when is this thing going to show itself? Who's there? And I stop, and I can see that I'm in a cavern. I call out, hey, hearing my voice echoing off of the surrounding environment. I stop and call out, hey, once again. I'm trying my best to figure out if anybody's here. I say, hey, I know you're hurt, but I can help you. I've come here with supplies, food, everything. Just let me know you're here. I can help you. I don't hear anything, so I stop for a moment. Places like this are always quiet, but it felt awfully so now. It's strange, I oddly felt quite relaxed, almost like I was in some kind of dream. I think because I had the rifle, I wasn't too worried at this point, but it was definitely odd. And now the blood trail has stopped. I haven't really got a choice though, other than just to keep checking in the area. I do know roughly where I am, but the further I go, the more loose this knowledge becomes. The thing is, literally everything looks the same here, especially in the snow, so that's not helping now. There's no footprints around now other than my own, so I know I'm definitely not where I should be, but at least with the knowledge that I'm starting from zero, I know that I can keep going and hopefully get somewhere half decent in terms of progress, so that's what I'm doing. I get further and then decide that I'm going to give up. I've come quite far now. I've searched the area that I really need to, and there's no more blood. So I head back. Why have you done that? A voice in my head says. You shouldn't have given up on somebody like that. And I start to have strange visions. I have the vision of somebody bleeding. I can see them wandering around aimlessly and just covered in blood. I think that's odd. I still can't make sense of this. It seems like they're being hunted too, which is especially weird. They're going further and further. Then I snap out of it again. I think I should really get back now. I'm somebody with a relatively over-imaginative thinking pattern at the best of times, but this was a bit creepy to me. I'm going further and further now, and eventually I get back to maybe the halfway point. I'm battling two different voices in my head now. One's telling me that you're a coward, you need to stop and go back, but the other one's telling me just go, get out of here. I then notice that there's some more blood. This time it seems much stronger, and I'm a bit concerned now. I can see the blood going up into the hill a bit further from where I am, and some blood on the trees. This is definitely from a person. I'm getting creeped out now. I grab my hand and try and will myself forward, almost imagining that there's another person there with me. So I start to progress onwards. Now crash. I hear the sound as though somebody's fallen, and I drop to one knee with my rifle in hand. I scream out, "Hey," and again I'm met with more reverberations of my voice coming back to me, the only solace I have in this moment. Now I move along, and with my hands shaking, trying to see where this all leads to. I now have some kind of flash again. My vision goes for a second, but now I can see dogs, or more like wolves, looking very angry up ahead of me. For a second I think they're real, and I realise that I'm aiming at them, but then I flash back to normal and there's nothing there. But it follows the blood. It's like my mind's trying to tell me something. Wolves. There must be wolves out here. So I start going further, and I can hear wolves. Oh no, I think. I must be in a bad area now. But I press on furthermore. The blood seems pretty bad. I know that I'm about to find a dead body. I get a chill up my spine as I realise this. The wind's picked up now, and it's kind of making a bit of a haunting sound. For reasons unknown to me, my legs feel extremely heavy at this point, and I really have to force myself up. I actually start using my hands on my knees to help me go further. I look at the blood on one of the trees and it looks fresh, and you can see the distinctive marks of somebody's forefingers. Oh god. I call out, "Hey, hey," somewhat getting angry this time. I force myself to go forward, really starting to feel sick now, and I have to keep swallowing to try and stop myself from vomiting. And now another flashback. And this one's so much more powerful than all the rest. I see it. Somebody being torn apart by dogs. I realise now they're wolves. Really going at them. This is a lot of blood now, and it makes me feel sick. I go back to normal and I'm frozen. I'm just coming up to the top now, and I'm scared to look down. I kind of fall at this point. I think it was almost like I kind of stepped forward, trying to get a foot in, but not realizing that the snow was quite soft and the ground was a bit further below it than I expected. And I start rolling down, tumbling now. I scream out, swearing, looking for my rifle. I punch the ground, then get up and quickly grab my gun again. I sweep it round and say, hey, hey, as I realize that there's more blood to my right. I turn around and that's when I see it. A body. A decomposing body in the snow. Though there's no blood around it this time. I think that's really weird. I think maybe more snow settled, so I walked towards it. I don't know why I was aiming my gun at it. I think it just made me feel a bit more safe. I kick the snow, but I can't get too close to it. I'm expecting to see some blood. Maybe there's a layer of snow covering it, but there's not at all. I do this for a while and do it in a semicircle, but no snow that reveals blood's underneath. Really strange. Now, I close my eyes for a second and I hear a terrifying scream, as well as some kind of howling sound. I turn around expecting to have to shoot some of these things, but there's nothing there. Then I realise I can hear some kind of animal nearby. I don't know what animal it is, but just some kind of thunderous growling sound, which is not too loud but detectable, like it wants me to know it's there. So I start going backwards. I'm absolutely fixated on this person that once was. It really felt horrible seeing this here. I just couldn't look away from it, and it's the only time in my life that I've ever had this before. It's like I was so fixated on this person's injury that they must have had that I forget everything else. Before I know it, I'm falling backwards again. I slap my hands down, but it's too late. I start tumbling backwards again. I come to a stop and my rifle hits the back of my head. I curse now and grab the rifle. I go to load another round in, ready to be fully loaded now, but it jams. I say, no, come on. I hit it on the ground and it makes a light thud. It's still jammed. I say, come on, you've got to be kidding with me. But alas, I'm wrong. So I just get up and start walking. I'm doing a slow kind of military walk, half squatted down. I don't want to be seen. I keep scanning my horizon, but I can't see anything. I'm walking slowly backwards. I also notice that there's no more blood at this time. I put it down to maybe the snow, but I think that's quite weird. I should have seen some more by now. I keep turning back. I can hear the growling sound once more. I decide that I need to pick up the pace a bit now, especially because I'm getting cold from being on the floor, so I start to pick up a light jog. I'm not really aiming the gun now, it was making my arms hurt holding it that way, so I'm just kind of holding it like I'm in water. But then I can hear something, much closer this time, another snarling growl. It's starting to get dark now and I do start to panic. I let off a shot in fear. It was probably lucky that I still had the gun higher than I expected, because I probably could have just killed someone then. I now realise that the rifle's actually unjammed itself and I'm really happy. I quickly put another round in and I'm ready to fight now. I think the bravery took over for maybe 1 second, but then I can hear more growling. I start to pick up the pace more. It must be those wolves. They've got to be hunting me now. I never had a situation like this before. I can let off my warning shots, but I don't know what to do other than this. I wasn't really trained for this. The thing is, there's one of me, and these are pack animals. So what if they want me? That'll be it. They'll just kill me, and then there's no more John going around anymore. I start to tear up at the thought of this. The thought of people knowing what happened to me. I guess I can go up in a tree, but how long can I stay up there for? It's going to be really hard to climb up these trees. I don't think I have the strength for it, to be honest. So I keep going now. I decide all I can do is just let off a few shots, and that's what I keep doing. I'm down to 4 rounds now, and I know I can't do this the whole way. I think I'm going to get down to my last 2, because at least then I can probably maybe kill a couple of these things. Now I hear a wolf howl. I haven't heard this before, and it really scares me. It sounded so close. I quickly look around in all directions trying to find this thing, but I can't find anything. I punch down now in anger. I slowed the pace a bit. The pace I had would have been impossible to keep up with in the thick snow like this where I was now. But I keep going. Whenever I heard that they were getting close, I would let off a round. I've only got a few more left now. I have to conserve the ammunition. I don't understand why they couldn't give us more ammo. I mean, I know I'd let off a lot of rounds, but come on, we're out here alone. I start going further when I now see one finally. There is a wolf not far away. I've never seen one this close before, and this thing was absolutely massive. It was a greyish colour and it looked really horrifying. I can see some more around but not very clearly, but this one, it was terrifying. I aim just above the tree where it is and bang, I put a hole in the tree. This thing sprints off now, but I can't see the direction it's gone, so I quickly reload and start picking up the pace more. I know that there's definitely more than 3, but I've only got 2 bullets now. It's getting more and more dark, and I know my night vision's not going to be near as good as theirs, but I have to keep going. So I press on now. It's all falls silent for a little while. I hope that somebody heard my shots being ringed off, but again, we don't have the radios now, so it might not have been much use. The problem is too, it's going to be really hard to find where they come from. I just hope that somebody heard it and can come and help me. I now make it back onto the path. I crash through it, leaving it open, and I start walking. Every time that I hear my feet on that wooden board, it made me feel more and more comfortable and confident. I know that I'm not that far away now. I put the safety on finally and shoulder that thing and keep going. I've probably gone for about 30 minutes straight now. I can't hear any more animals, and I see some of the others. They look very panicked and rush over to me asking what's wrong. I just stand there for a moment and say, "Wolves, wolves, there's wolves out there," and they look concerned. One of the other guys goes out to get more guns, and now I have to show them where I found it, that body. I say there's somebody there, they're pretty beat up. They ask how bad is it, and I say, well, I don't think they're gonna make it. Now time is of the essence. I felt a lot better now having all 4 of us there together. They called our squad the Hunter Squad, which was kind of cool I guess, but I kind of felt like we were the pack animals now and not them, so we head out there. So we start going towards the very end of where that thing was, opening the gate again. That was some really weird thing that I've never been able to explain since actually. The gate had managed to close. I run through that, leaving it open basically, crashing, but it was closed. Strange, maybe it was just my momentum made it swing back, but I didn't hear anything. But I don't know, I could have been scared and not heard it. So now we go ahead. We're all pointing in different directions, and there's one of us going a bit slower checking our 6. This is really important. I don't have more than the 2 bullets with me now, but that's fine, we have quite a few. We've all got these rifles. They're not semi-autos, but they're pretty powerful, I guess. So we start going, and I say, but there was blood here. There was literally blood here. I don't understand. But we keep on going. And I can't figure out where we're supposed to be. We now stop because we can hear growling, and we get down into a formation. That's when I hear the first shot. I turn around to look where it's come from, and there's another. I can then see my colleague shooting away. Bang, bang, bang. 5 shots are let off in total, and then there's silence. I look up and I can see some animals slouched over. There's at least 3 of their bodies and they look huge. I go over there, but my colleague stops me saying, "You're crazy, you're gonna get yourself killed, John." I say, "Yeah, you're right." And I start slowly turning back. We move up now and we keep going. I finally recognise where I was because of my own footsteps, but again, there's no blood, which is strange. I see, yeah, it's right there over the hill, and we make a formation up there. The team leader then goes down to investigate Mark. He's quite brave, I've got to give it to him. He used to be in the military, so he's not really fazed by much of anything. So he goes down. He gets further and further until he puts his hand up, signaling him for us to stop. At least that's what I think he's doing. It might have been a military thing, I don't know. He then goes over to where the body is, and he says, "Yeah, he's long gone." He puts his hand up, gesturing for us to come closer. We can now see that this person's probably been dead there for quite a long time. We decide that we're going to recover it the next day. It's too dangerous for us to be out there. I mean, it was good, don't get me wrong. We investigated. We thought it was somebody potentially still with life to live, but for this person, sadly, it wasn't the case. My God, that's horrible what they do to them, I thought to myself, as we turn back around and start making our way back. We then get back to almost exactly the same spot where that we've been shooting them things, but we can't see any, which is really strange. We think maybe they've limped off or something, but my colleagues are certain that they put enough into them that they shouldn't have made it. It's really bizarre. We all look at each other confused, but decide to press on. We're still holding that formation, just not as tight. Because of getting a few of them and the sounds of our rifles, they've definitely fled now. We eventually get back in, and I get sent back home again. It turns out that they could never recover the bodies of those wolves. It's really strange. The other thing that doesn't make sense is I definitely saw some blood, but that body had been there for quite a while. So I just don't understand what could have happened in that case. It was really one of the most horrible things that I ever experienced or witnessed in my life, and I'm glad that I've never seen anything like it since. I work as a fire watcher in my native country. I'd done this for a large time in my life. I'd spent some time in the military too, well, about 2 years or so, but I always enjoyed my time out in the nature the most. Now, the area that I covered was very pretty. I'm actually from the area that doesn't have lots of hills and stuff, so being out in where the hills are and the mountains was something really beautiful. I remembered that I absolutely loved this place, but one day my perspective on it really changed. Now let me explain. The land of mine actually has lots of history. My grandfather had worked out here before, and apparently he said that there was lots of weird things that would happen. Apparently they'd report some kind of mysterious figure in white. It looked like a beautiful young girl with very long flowing hair. But apparently she would float through the woods, seemingly without interacting with anything, bouncing from side to side before disappearing, making eye contact with men. He told me that they never figured out exactly why she was out there, just that it had really scared them. Apparently somebody was actually murdered here long ago, and allegedly that was her spirit haunting here. Apparently she was looking for her missing partner or something, and that's what they thought was happening, that she was here, roaming around trying to haunt them. Now, I kind of believed it, and a lot of people in my family also did. When I was a kid, I was absolutely horrified about being out here. The problem was, when I was young too, I was bigger, so I didn't have much stamina. I would find myself getting out of breath just going up the trails and things and doing the hike to the different areas we would go. So I always thought that I was especially vulnerable if anything were to happen, and that made me really scared. I was convinced that one day something was going to try and get me. So, doing my work, I would often spend lots of time out there by myself or with a small team. The most important thing that we could do is just survey everywhere and make sure that there were no fires. I had a couple of big fires though that we had to deal with. Where I live, you also had to help put out the fire if you could. It was something we'd also do to help out the fire department when they got here. We had pretty limited resources, so it was really important that we would help out and try and make a difference. I was never too worried by these fires though. There was very scarce and sparse population here, so it was pretty easy to notify people in the surrounding areas. Usually the fires would just burn themselves out. I do remember one strange thing though. I remember once during one of the fires I was helping with, I could have sworn that I'd seen a figure in the fire. It was just standing there and kind of staring at us. I only saw it for about a second or two before it eventually gone back into the flames, but it sounded just like what my grandfather had described. We knew for a fact there weren't any people here, so we weren't too worried, but we did have a quick search around. Maybe somebody got lost out there. But this thing was floating. I never really put two and two together, so I can't be certain that I actually saw the same thing as my grandfather had, but my grandfather was convinced that I had from the way I described it. I was a little put off by the whole experience, to be honest, but let me get to my main story. Now, working out here one day, I remembered that my colleagues had reported a huge fireball. They basically reported to me what could only sound like a UFO, which had crashed off somewhere, and now it was up to us to go and investigate and figure it out. The good news for me is that there wasn't any fire out here, not that we could see anyway. This happened around nightfall. They basically said it kind of looked like a meteor or something, and they were very scared about going up there. I myself wasn't too scared about it for some reason. I just thought, I'm going to have a good hike through here, then eventually find it, and it will be something cool. Maybe something I could even take home, like a cool rock off the side of it or something. So I start my hike in, and it starts raining immediately, which again is a good sign, because if there is a fire, then we haven't got to worry too much. The rain was really going to help put it out. I remember when we started, I didn't bother looking about how far I had to go because it was quite some distance. I was on foot and had my radio, and eventually broke off from the other guys I was working with. I continue hiking and realise that I'm getting very out of breath. It was weird, it reminded me of when I was much younger and more unfit, but it was almost like any time I did an incline, I would really feel it. I wasn't even carrying that much weight on me too, and I thought I was pretty good and healthy at the time, but I guess not. It was kind of a wake-up call for me more than anything else though, because if there was actually danger, then I wouldn't have been one of the best people to help you, and I didn't like that. That didn't sit well with me. I needed to do as much as possible to help people, and I felt like I was letting down my community. Now, while hiking, every so often I can hear some faint cries. It was pretty creepy. It kind of sounded like an alien voice, to be honest, and I thought that was really weird. I wasn't really convinced there was an alien, but it was definitely a weird animal. Now, some of my colleagues actually reported this on the radios too, so I knew I wasn't the only one hearing it. I then go further and further, and I can actually see some of the trees have been scraped to the top, where obviously something crashed here, but I couldn't see anything. The cries stopped after a little bit, and I couldn't seem to locate them. I just knew it was definitely scaring me, because now it was getting to nightfall. There was some weird sound, and I wasn't sure what direction I was going in. It was kind of like the sound of something ticking over, like a constant click. It kind of sounded like an engine, but a little bit different. I also felt very uncomfortable now. The rain was giving me some kind of reassurance so weirdly. I don't know, it felt like everything else was eerily quiet. So having the sounds of nature, at least in some form, was definitely something I like to have. In this area, you can actually see pretty good through the woods. The trees were tall, but they weren't very thick. Also, the plants on either side of me only come up to about my knee height, so visibility wasn't too bad. It did mean that every so often I'd have to climb up a tree a bit to scan areas, but that was fine. I was still following the direction of the trees which were damaged, until eventually, I see something really creepy. Just up ahead, I see what I can only describe as some kind of demon. It looked like a tall figure, covered in some kind of black material, slowly lurching around. I dug down for a second and slowly lift my head up. I hear one more faint cry, and I can't figure out where it's coming from. I radio in my language that I've seen something very weird, and my colleagues respond and say that they're coming over. I was actually so scared that I stayed crouched down for another 10 minutes, and then I feel a hand touch my back. I feel like my heart stops and I have no pulse, as within a flash I turn around and it's my colleague. I swear at them and ask them, why did they make me jump like that? And they said they thought I was hurt. Did I truly look that scared? Maybe I did. I was getting paranoid now, but I decide to get up and we go towards where I heard the thing, but I don't see anything. We decide the best thing to do is to split up, and I continue going to where the UFO crash site is. I keep walking and lurching through the forest until eventually I see something smouldering off in the distance. All I can see is smoke at this point, and I think maybe there is a fire. I really don't know what to expect now. I really think that I'm about to be met by some kind of tall green or grey men. God knows what I've just seen. I have my Bible in my pocket and I'm clutching it very strong as I get closer and closer and start to pray. I seem to become stuck in quicksand though, and I just can't bring myself to move more forward. I had a strange sense of dread that I haven't had before, but eventually I managed to force myself to put one foot in front of the other and make my way over the horizon. Then I see it. Some kind of mangled up thing, covered by trees. It's kind of white and blue in colour, which I didn't expect, covered in some kind of black silk. It then becomes more apparent what I'm looking at. This isn't a UFO at all, this is a plane crash. Within a second, I realise what's happened, and I quickly scream onto the radio that we've had a downed aircraft here. What was it, a UFO? I say, no, it's one of ours. It's a small aircraft. I can see that this thing has come down and obviously set on fire. Then one of my colleagues screams, we found him. I ask what, but don't get a reply. I just sprint back to their direction. By the time that I've gotten over there, I can see my colleagues surrounding a person. They're covered in jet fuel and something else, and clearly it was a pilot with half of their hair burnt off their body. They absolutely look like an alien, and I suddenly feel very faint. I actually ended up passing out now, and I can't remember much else. I just know that about 20 minutes later I woke up again, and I seemed to have a dream. I had a really long dream, which is weird because I knew I was only asleep for 20 minutes or so, and my colleagues are pouring water on my head and waking me up. There's an emergency worker then too, who's a medic checking over me. He says, are you okay? And I say, yeah, I'm fine. And I have some sugary drinks, which one of my colleagues gave me, and some snacks, and I feel much better, though I'm covered in a cold sweat. I eventually get up, and we start walking back, and there's more police coming. Eventually, we all make it back, and I get to go home early because of medical reasons. Now, I never actually know what come of that pilot or the plane wreckage. I just know I can't believe how scary and inhuman he looked when we found him. Poor guy, I really hope that he's okay. It was easily the most scary experience in my entire life, one that I'm never gonna forget. One of the weirdest stories that I've ever heard happened is not my own, but my father's. My father works as a forest service worker, and he had many weird encounters over his years. This one in particular gave me chills all throughout my childhood, and it made me constantly just question things. Now, I'll tell this exactly how my father's told me and how that he's wrote it down for me, so sit back and enjoy. I think it's truly bizarre. Now, to start out, everything's going pretty well in life. I'm happy and my wife is now pregnant. Now this is going to be our second child. We already had our other one who's about 1 now, and we're really excited to have a second. We had a boy and we were hoping for another girl. It turned out that we had another boy, but that was just as much joy into our lives. Those who haven't experienced parenthood don't understand how it changes your life sometimes, and how it changes your approach to taking risks. I know that I certainly had the same feeling too. Now, where I was based at for my job, I didn't really encounter anything too heavy. I hadn't been working this role for that many years, and there was other more experienced guys out there. In fact, a lot of the time I'd actually get quite frustrated because I really truly wanted to do more, but I just wasn't able to. Sometimes there would be things that the other guys would know that I could do, and they would just rush off to do it before I had the chance to, and it was so frustrating. I enjoyed being out there, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of stuck doing more computer stuff and just, I guess, the boring things. Now, at this place I knew that I could progress, but it was going to take years. They basically offered me all the training and everything, but my god, it was slow. The thing was, I was probably smarter than all of the people there, just not being given any opportunities that I needed to progress. It was almost like they'd given me this form, and it said everything I needed to do, but there were holes in it that they couldn't see, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I was quite tempted to join the Navy. I actually wanted to become a Navy SEAL at the time. It wasn't really possible because of some of the injuries I had, but I know that if I really pushed myself, I probably could have overcome them. But the problem was, even sometimes when I was doing this job, even just hiking around and doing my normal things, I would have a pain that I couldn't seem to stop from the bottom of my foot. I actually still have issues with it today. Not quite sure why it started, but yeah, it's just something I get on with. So on this particular day, it was just the same. There was more exciting call-outs and things to go and do, but literally before I could even get to the radio to say I would do it, someone would say I'm on it and would already be up there with their coffee in their hand, taking the last sips of their coffee before flying on out the door and to go and have all the fun. Yeah, it kind of really sucked doing this, but I guess it gave me more time to think and just relax a bit. The problem is, if you're like me, that time very quickly lends to boredom. I started going through some of the records and some of the reports. I basically had to reorganize them because some people in this office area, they would just throw everything onto a desk and not do anything. They would only look for items if they needed it, which of course is a very stupid idea and wastes everyone's time, but back in my day I guess that's how it was. So I start reading through some reports. There was a few pretty creepy things on there. Some people would say that they had a feeling, like an intense feeling of fear that they couldn't describe, accompanied by a knocking on some of the trees. They were never able to locate the source of this sound, and they thought it was just animals, but it came up quite often over the years. Then I heard a really strange one. Apparently, there was a ranger that worked here, and a lot of the other people thought that he was going crazy. I was reading a second-hand account of what had happened to him. Apparently, something had spoke to him and told him the future. Weirdly though, when I looked back through another account, which was more recent than that one, some of the things that he said actually come true. And the person making the report actually noted that and how weird it was. Upon further investigation, it turned out that this person thought that he had spoke to beings or something, I don't know, kind of like aliens. They didn't describe it very well, just very vaguely. Now it seems like many of these cases were dismissed. There were other weird things too, like a Pacific area where you'd feel very hot, completely unnaturally, to the point that you'd actually question if there was some kind of hot spring there, or something weird that shouldn't have been there, but again, they could never find the source of it. The thing that made this even more bizarre is that eventually the plants and trees and everything in the area would start to die, so you basically knew for certain that something was definitely off there. Now I decided that I had to get out and do the very minimum just to not be in the office, and that's what I did. I remembered setting out and I was being a little bit more paranoid than normal. I think all these stories were just playing in my head. I remembered I kept thinking that I saw something walking through the tree line above, ahead of me, always maintaining the higher ground. It kind of just trailed alongside me. It's really hard to describe, but was truly creepy. Now I don't know what it was, but I think it was some kind of large animal there. Not big enough to be a bear, but certainly weird. I did think maybe it was a hiker out there, but it wasn't possible. I thought that was bizarre. I remember thinking to myself that you've just learnt the power of human potential in the mind, and it was pretty scary to me. Now, life goes on. We probably get to about a month or 6 weeks in, and again, they're just not training me properly. It's kind of really annoying because they'll complain at me for doing something when it's exactly how somebody's told me to do it. And they'll say, oh no, just do it confidently. But then they'll say, why did you do that? And you'll explain that's how you're trained, and they wouldn't seem to listen, and it was kind of like a hostile group. I didn't end up staying there for too long, but I'll get to that later. So what do? Once again, get reserved to balancing the books and just doing the normal work. Now this is actually at a time before we had computers, so it did make days very boring too. The problem I found is that some people just did not have good handwriting. I've never been the best at reading others' handwriting, but especially in these situations, my god, it was like some of these people had honestly made an effort to write as illegible as possible. And again, if you can't read it, they complain, so I kind of become an expert of reading these things eventually. And again, every so often there's weird reports. I realise too, quite often when it's recorded, people just think, oh, it's the other guy not paying attention. Maybe he wants everyone to look at him and stuff like that. At least that's on the report conclusion, but I had a feeling that something was off when I kept on seeing the reportings of some kind of beings out there. This spanned over a number of years too, and long before I was there. They all seemed to be described as relatively the same. They called them the forest walkers. Apparently they seemed to be quite tall, and they would walk in almost a weird limp motion. The weird thing is that they would be silent too, and if you approached them, weird things would happen. Some people said they felt almost like they were high. Others said that they would just know things they couldn't have otherwise and stuff like that. I don't know if I believe in the supernatural that much, or at least at the time I didn't, but I just considered that these were just things that happen when you've been out in the woods for too long by yourself. Now eventually as time increased, and I started complaining to the higher ups about the issues I was having, I started to get out more and do more interesting things. I even got to rescue a few people too, which is a really cool feeling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but there's something so cool about knowing that you preserved human life. You stepped in and you made a big difference and impact for someone. It's not something I'd felt before in other jobs too, so I was quite happy. Now, as I go out for a patrol one evening, I remembered having a strange feeling that the air was different. There was almost some kind of metallic smell that I couldn't quite describe. I was concerned that I had some kind of illness or that I accidentally got something on my nose, but no matter how much I wipe my nose, I can't seem to get rid of the feeling. And there was almost some kind of static in the air. You know, like when you have static electric and just before you feel the buzz, it was kind of like that. Now that's when I feel something. I can tell something's looking at me and I stop to turn around and see what it is. And then, I can make out some kind of figure. It's probably about 20 feet away. It's wearing kind of like a dark coloured robe, but when it gets closer it appears more white. It walks with a weird limp and I can't believe my eyes. I actually rub my eyes quickly, not sure for a second if I'm dreaming, and it's gone. Now I think this is pretty creepy. I want to figure out what this is, so filled with excitement I actually jogged towards where it was. Now I couldn't tell you too much else about it, but just that it completely vanished. I probably spent another hour myself actually searching the surrounding areas just to see if I could find something, anything there to explain what I'd just seen, but alas, I come up blank. There's nothing there but myself. Now I'm actually a little bit irritated because I don't want to seem stupid. I really don't want to become like one of the people whose stories I've read, probably to be dismissed later on the same way that I dismissed some of theirs. But currently, it seems like I'm going to have no option but for that to be the case for myself. Yeah, it sucked really. I go back eventually and tell them what happened. Now, no one believes me, which is what I expected, and they say, yeah, you're too junior to be going out there and investigating things like this. I was pretty fed up again. I come from a role before where I was very well respected, and honestly the way I was being treated was really annoying me. Now a few months go on, and it becomes winter, and the going gets a little bit more tough really. It was pretty cold out there. I mean, uncomfortably so for myself. Now, I remembered on one particular day, I can't tell you specifically what I was doing, I just remembered that I was out there, that I spotted something weird, I mean really bizarre. There were these small figures, kind of limping around in the woods, again silently. Now I can't believe what I'm seeing. They're probably about 5 feet tall now, and in more of a white coloured gown kind of thing. Like I said, I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe it was something from Halloween, like decorations people put out there. And I actually wasn't too scared now. I was convinced that this wasn't actually a real thing or threat or danger, so I decided to sit back and very slowly follow these things. Now I didn't look behind myself, so there could have been more, but these things just kept on marching on, kind of down the path for a good 10 minutes longer. Now they never once seemed to notice me or so much as turn around, so again, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing, but I think it's some kind of Halloween decoration that someone's playing around with. I don't know, it could be a cult, it could be anything, but I'm not too worried. I don't know if it was the size of them or what, but I just wasn't concerned. Also, there seemed to be nature interacting normally around, so that meant that these things weren't a threat, at least I thought. So this continues on until eventually they all stop at something. I stop too, and I can see about 4 of them. I was incredibly curious as to what they were looking at, but there's no real way for me to be able to see where I'm based currently. I get closer and closer and realise that I'm going to have to take the long way round now to figure out what it is. I decide to take a stealthy approach, and I try and walk very slowly through the foliage and get around. I do make it to a pretty good horizon, and I can see in front, and I still can't figure out what they're looking at. Now I'm sure these are people now, so I become a little bit more confident, and I walk down even closer to where they are. Eventually, I ended up crashing through some of the brush, and I decide that I'm going to be more present now. Obviously these people know that I'm here, so what's the point of trying to hide away from them? I go a little bit quicker now, and eventually go round to where I think that they're facing, and I can't see their actual faces. It's kind of just dark where their faces are completely covered up in something. Now, I crouch down to get a better look at them, and suddenly, I can hear voices in my head. They don't sound like voices I ever heard before too, and it's almost like my own voice but different. And I keep hearing different things that haven't happened yet. I hear about the birth of my son and know that it's going to be a boy. I know exactly what he's going to look like, how my career's gonna go, what my wife's gonna do, and some of the hardships that come up and who's gonna pass away in my family. It actually makes me incredibly emotional at this point, and I almost feel like it's too much and start to cry a bit. I ended up kind of just becoming overwhelmed with my emotions, and I fall back into the dirt and stare up at the sky. The sky's very bright today, and it actually looks quite nice. After a moment, I kind of stop hearing the voices so much. They kind of just slowly fade out, like somebody slowly turning down the volume on a record, and I get up. I realise now that whatever these things are has gone now, and I'm just here alone, very confused as to what's actually just happened to me. I get up, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation for this. I ended up scouring around for probably another hour and a half until I conclude that nothing's here. That's when my panic finally catches up with me, and I decide that I need to get back as quick as possible. I start making my way there. I eventually get back to the station and immediately write down my report. I didn't speak to anybody else about what had happened, and that's when I'm confused. I suddenly realised that what I was reading was very similar to some of the reports of what had happened years before. The ones where that people had considered the guys that were reporting it a little bit crazy or seeing things. And for that reason, I actually took the report and ended up throwing it into the trash. I didn't want my colleagues to think I was crazy. I mean, I didn't like most of them to begin with. I knew that this was going to hurt me moving on to the other areas that I wanted to work, so there was going to be no benefit of me actually posting this. And I ended up moving on and working as a ranger in different areas and doing different kinds of roles too, even being a fire service worker. Now here's the weird thing. I only realised it much later, but I did have a son, and he looked exactly like I knew he would. The job that I changed into is exactly what I heard I would. My wife's role too. Also, some family members that died, they were the exact people who I was told would do so as well. Now suddenly I felt kind of a weird fear come over me, almost like a wash and flood of emotions coming back, realising that something had contacted me back then, and for whatever reason wanted me to know what was going to happen. I can't put my finger on why this happened or how it happened to me. I just know what I saw was real, and that I wasn't the only person that saw those kinds of things out there. Lots of my other colleagues had experienced some very similar things, and I just don't know what to make of it all. Now I need to give you some context before starting my story. My parents owned an absolutely beautiful property in a deep part of the forest that nobody ever really went to. My girlfriend was always paranoid, so I'd always have to make fun of her whenever we went there, but she absolutely hated staying there at night. One of the reasons I actually understood. During one time we stayed there during December, I stupidly woke up in the night and turned off all of the radiators because I was worried that there was going to be a fire. We had 2 oil ones and 1 electric one, and I was convinced that in the night I would move round and knock off the blanket and make a massive fire and we would die. So she woke up from the cold and said she'd never sleep there again. And I knew that was going to happen, but I decided I wanted to stay there a few nights. So one particular summer evening, around April, we set off and make it to the cabin. Now we're having a really good time there, and my girlfriend decides that she wants to go out into nature to have a look around, because this is something that she loves to do. Now, I don't want to go out this soon. I have some work to do on my laptop, so I'm staying behind to do that. And I'm actually quite annoyed because there's things I want to do with friends that live not too far away, but I just have work to do that's making everything clash. And I don't want to have the feeling, you know, where you've just finished work, then just try and do something social, and your brain just can't connect to changing from work, so you just feel like you're not enjoying it. Well, yeah, I was a bit annoyed trying to work as quick as possible, but God likes a hard worker, so I stay. I say goodbye to my girlfriend as she goes out, then I go into another room. I'm working away on my laptop and I can hear the door open. I think maybe my girlfriend's come back to get something, but I can't hear much. I say to her, hey, what have you come back for? But she doesn't reply. I think this is odd, but I thought she was probably just annoyed at me for something and continue working. I can hear some more movement, then eventually the door closes. I think to myself, great, God knows what I've done wrong now. But I decide that I need to continue working. Deciding that I don't want to be in trouble when she comes back, I decide to give my girlfriend a call and say, are you annoyed at me? To which she is surprised and says no. I say, why didn't you say anything when I come in? She says, I've been outside the whole time, what are you talking about? Stop playing these games on me. And I say, no, wait, didn't you come in then just ignore me? And she says no. She says, I'm sure it was one of the neighbours in the other properties just getting something and you heard their door. I think this is odd because I haven't heard anybody else around but us, and it's extremely rare that they would visit. I tell her, yeah, you're probably right, and go back to my work. I decide that I'm gonna have a quick look round and see if anything's missing, but everything's where it should be, so I decide it's probably nothing, and I'm here anyway. I'd happily fight if I need to. I'm not saying I'm strong or anything, but maybe I could scare someone, who knows. So I continue on with my work. Now, I probably do so for another good hour or so, and I take a call off of my friend. He calls to invite me out to a friend's surprise birthday, and I desperately want to go, but I know it's not possible because I have to go out to 2 or 3 other places after, but I really want to try and go. And I tell him not to worry, I'm going to try and make it, but I'll let him know. I say God as I put the phone down. I'm desperate to get out and do things, but I'm chain bound to my laptop doing work. I decide to press on. Now, as I'm doing my work, I get another phone call from my girlfriend who says, are you gonna come over? I say, what do you mean? She's probably about 400 meters away from me, but she says, where are you? I say, I'm in doing my work, you know what I'm doing. She says, huh? That's odd, I thought I just saw you outside. I say, no, I don't think it's anything, but you should probably come back, to which she agrees. I decide to go out and try and meet her halfway there. I think it's a lot safer that way. I actually look around quite paranoid, thinking maybe someone's there, but surely it's my neighbours. I try and affirm to myself. But I'm wrong. I can clearly see into the other cabins that nobody else is home, and I quickly go out and find my girlfriend. More than anything, I'm happy I'm not in trouble for no reason, and my girlfriend's actually relatively happy, so we come back and end up watching a film. Now, we ended up going out for the rest of the day, and luckily, I managed to do all of the things I need to, and I actually feel really happy about this. We then come back to the cabin, and all is normal. We have a really good time, and slowly fall asleep. Now, I probably fell asleep for a couple of minutes when I'm awoken suddenly. My girlfriend's annoyed at me. I don't know what for. She says, hey, why do you keep talking? I say, what are you talking about? I haven't said a word to you. She gets angry and says, stop kidding, I'm actually really scared now. I say again, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been asleep the whole time. She says, were you not talking to me? I said, no, of course not. It's probably just in my sleep. Now you need to do the same. My girlfriend eventually falls asleep, and I do too. Now, when I wake up in the morning, I have a strange feeling that something's off. I can't really describe exactly what it is, but I feel like somebody's behind me when I'm working on my laptop. And one of the things I made has gone missing. I think it's really strange because it's work related and I don't understand why my girlfriend would move it or anyone would take it. I was actually worried at the time that I had memory issues because of an injury from work, but it turns out I was wrong about it and I just had poor memory. So I kind of brush it off as nothing and just me going a bit senile. Now I drink some of my water, and not long afterwards I feel really weird. I feel really lightheaded and dizzy, almost like I've been drugged or something. I think I've just stayed up too long trying to do work, and I decide to lay down. I don't tell my girlfriend what's wrong because, like I said at the time, I was really worried about having some kind of brain issue from work. My girlfriend then goes out again eventually, and I just tell her have a good time and she goes. Now I wake up 2 hours later to miss phone calls off my girlfriend. I have the worst headache ever, and I realize my girlfriend's just moving out the door now. I say, hey, where are you going? But she doesn't reply to me. I then go to call her quickly because I don't feel like moving, and she says, why haven't you answered my calls? I say, what do you mean? Why did you just leave? My girlfriend then goes completely silent and quickly comes inside. She then says, what's wrong with you? You look absolutely horrible. I say, I don't know, I feel really bad at the minute. I say, I think it's an injury from work, but she says, no, it can't be. I then realise that it's probably from what I just drank. I say, babe, don't drink any of the water, there's definitely something wrong here. But then she reminds me, what do you mean I just left? I say, when I was waking up, I saw you quickly leave through the door. To which my girlfriend gives me a pure look of horror and says, no, I was outside for the last 2 hours and got annoyed you wouldn't reply to my calls, but I thought you were busy working. I then tell her frantically, no, ever since I've drank this water I felt terrible, but I definitely saw you or someone leaving. We then both look at each other horrified. I quickly go and grab a knife and start shouting at whoever it is to come out or I'm gonna stab them. It must have looked pretty funny because I was saying things I'd seen in movies, but we're both scared now. My girlfriend goes and waits by the window because it's safer there. I search every inch of the apartment and I can't find anything. I think this is really strange and I say we have to get out of here and make a police report. My girlfriend agrees and we gather up the stuff we need, which is basically our laptops, and quickly head over to the car. Just as I'm about to drive off, my girlfriend says, no, wait, look. I don't know what she's talking about, but she says, look, please, do you not see that? I look up and I can clearly see some kind of marks on the window. I get out really quickly, this time filled with rage. I still have a terrible headache and I just assumed I was dehydrated, but I make my way over to the cabin windows and I can clearly see handprints all over them. They're from the outside too, and there's lots of different hands of different sizes. I don't need to hang around much longer. I just played it cool and quickly sprinted back to the truck. Well, as cool as you can look when you look terrified and you don't say anything and just run and hit the accelerator as quick as possible. My girlfriend doesn't actually say anything to me because it's clear what's happened. She has better eyes than I do and she can see all of the handprints. I didn't want to tell her when we were driving away that all of them were different sizes. We eventually make it over to my parents' house and I go and tell my dad what happened. I don't want to tell my girlfriend too many details because I know she'll get really scared, and I trusted telling my dad. My dad gave me a funny look and told me that some of the neighbours have reported seeing weird things out in the forest at night, in the sense of figures in all black walking round, seemingly trying desperately not to be spotted. I say, Dad, why didn't you tell me? And he says, son, I didn't want to worry you. I'm sorry for what's happened. I forget to tell my dad about the water that I've drank and how strange I felt, and my dad gives me a really weird look saying they probably drugged you and they were probably trying to kidnap you. I feel absolutely awful now. I'm more annoyed at myself for being so ignorant. Even if I'd got one of them with the knife, surely the others would have come. The weird thing was though, there was almost no signs of anybody around other than the person I saw in the handprints. I mean, you'd think all of the leaves in the forest would have been disturbed, but they were pretty normal, and I just don't know what to think of it. Of course, we never went back there again, but I haven't really felt right about the whole situation since, and I actually get really paranoid when I'm going to sleep. Now, I'm one of those people that can only really relax when I'm in nature, and luckily for me, I lived in an area that was very close to nature. Having been a forest ranger before, I guess I was really at one with nature and find peace in myself out there, so I didn't mind going during some gloomy mornings or during the winter months. I actually preferred it in some ways, to be honest. So I'd set out on one of these walks, just like the thousands I had before probably. I'd clocked up hundreds of miles in forest just from walking, and not only on my job. Now, I wasn't actually on duty during this particular day. Now, if I said it wasn't cold out, I would be lying. There was actually frost all over the floor, which made it look really cold, I thought. But to some people, this might be a bad thing, but I don't know. I'm walking through an area of forest that has really nice tall trees. They're pretty bare at the bottom, but have some leaves on the top and some leaves on the floor. I liked being able to walk through, especially at times like this when there was mist. It looked like the start of a horror movie, or maybe a Halloween movie, but I guess they're the same thing. But to give you a picture, the trees look almost black. There's an overcast so you can't really see the sun, and there's frost all over the floor and some water dripping from the trees. Again, to some people I'd understand why they might not like it, but to me, it was beautiful. So I begin on my walk like normal, and I realise it is actually quite cold, so I decide I probably shouldn't stop and should just keep going, because that's when you get cold, when you stop moving. And where water kept falling onto my head, it was actually making me a little bit wet, and that's the easiest way to lose body heat. Now, I'm having a really good time on my walk, and I eventually make it through into a clearing where the trees change and there's relatively tall grass. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Scotland, but it kind of looks like some of the forests in there, and I thought this was really beautiful. Now, as I'm going along my way, I keep on catching some strange movement on the mossy rocks. It's really hard to describe, but it almost looks like every so often I see something move. Kind of like there's a lag in my vision, but there's literally nothing wrong with my vision because I have eyes that are perfectly good. I think maybe it's just my brain going a bit funny, so I decide to keep going. Now I'm following an old wall which is really beautiful and has more of this moss on it. Now I can't actually see very far ahead of me because the fog is quite thick now. It's slowly getting darker, but I know roughly where I am, so I haven't got anything to worry about really. I decide I need to make it away from the moss and get to an area that I know better. I can hear a faint moaning in the distance through the fog where I can't actually see. It's bizarre because it doesn't sound like any of the animals that I've encountered before or anything that you'd usually expect to find out here. And I also can't see it. There's just fog everywhere. It also gives a nice silence to the forest, well, except for this sound. It's a very deep kind of moan, but more aggressive if that makes sense. I think this is strange, but I think it could just be some animal I've not really encountered before and continue onwards. I decide that I should probably try and get to some high ground and make my way back to where I can return to my car easily because it is really cold. So I continue walking. I'm off the trail now, just going through the grassy stuff. Now, it's actually quite annoying because every time I'm walking, there are trees that have kind of fallen or where the branches are low, so I have to keep ducking under them. I continue making my way when I realise that one of the rocks looks like it's moving. It's a large green moss covered one and it seems like it's just sliding down, but not making any sounds. I stop and stare at it until it slowly goes off into the fog where I can't see it now. I think this is really bizarre. It appears like it almost stands up to the height of a human man and slowly kind of moves along like it's got parts of it that aren't fully connected. You know how if you move a mop, kind of like that, like detached but joined at the same time. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little worried at this point. It literally looks like someone in a ghillie suit, or maybe like a sniper suit. I try and get closer to it, but it disappears over the hill. I figured out what's happened now. Somebody is hunting in a ghillie suit but hasn't told anyone. Well, not me at least. I actually get a bit angry at this point because that's actually really dangerous for me. Because they could easily mistake me for something in the fog and take a shot at me. And guess what? There's not meant to be hunters here. At least I know what was making those creepy sounds earlier. I move further along and I can see more of the moss covered rocks. It looks just like whatever this person is, and as I stop for a few minutes, I can hear the sound again, this time closer, like a deep moaning sound. I look off and once again, I can see this thing. It looks like it's crouched down with its head down against a tree, moving very slightly forwards and backwards. I then notice to the left of it, there seems to be another person in a ghillie suit doing exactly the same thing. I think this is really odd. It just looks like big moss covered people moving, almost in distress. Now I call out and say, hey, you need to stop this. You're really scaring me, and you're not meant to be hunting here. Then there's silence. One of these things stands up and just stares at me. I say stare because I can't really see its eyes, but this thing's tall. It's probably 6 feet at least, and it's not moving now. The other one's doing the same. At this moment, I'm starting to really doubt whether this is actually a person messing around with me or not. Or maybe some deranged, crazy person, I don't know. And then, I hear the sound again. It's definitely coming from whatever these things are. And they start slowly moving towards me. Not very quick, almost like limping towards me, but something's just so off about it. I think maybe it's people trying to scare me off, so I stand my ground. Well, that lasts for about 2 seconds before I get a gut feeling that I shouldn't really be here right now. I turn around and start making a quick walk away. I know if I walk quickly I can probably escape whatever this is, but I don't want to run and hurt myself on a rock. I turn around and I can't see too far because of the fog. I do this for a good few minutes and realise that this thing is keeping pace with me pretty nicely. I then make my way to even more of the moss covered rocks, and I get a weird feeling that something just isn't right. I feel like I'm in something's home and I'm not meant to be, and in all my years of being a ranger I've never seen a creature like this. It really looks like a weird swamp creature, but not. I don't know, it just should not be out in the forest. Now, I've heard stories from other rangers about this area having tribes that used to live here that would do all kinds of rituals and they would describe some kind of night creatures, but these were completely different. The thing that had been described to us was much taller, almost like a giant pencil that would walk along slowly, but similarly, this thing would actually go in pairs or groups, so I don't know, maybe this was a winter variant I was seeing. No, stop. My mind's playing tricks on me. This can't be real. I continue going, and the fog's actually relatively annoying now. It's kind of making me feel like there's too much moisture everywhere, though I guess that's what it is. I continue until eventually I'm on a path again and I pick up the pace. I manage to make it towards trees that are actually a lot easier to move through and the path is straight. I stop and take a moment to question my own sanity. What are these things? What did I just see? And sure enough, one of them catches up with me. I can just about make a silhouette out in the background, and sure enough, it's slowly coming towards me. I scream, hey, I'm a park ranger and you better stop or you're going to be in some real trouble. The thing keeps moving, and I can just feel water dripping onto my head from some of the trees. I decide that I have to sprint now. I actually fall instantly, and I feel like my head from. When I grew up, I'd always play out with the same group of kids. We all went to the same school together. I didn't actually live on the same side of town as them. Basically, the area that I grew up in had one big road that went down the middle, and it kind of divided them off pretty nicely. It made it a little bit of a pain to get over to the other side because the crossings were really slow, but that wasn't too much of an issue. The side of which I grew up in probably wasn't the best out of the two sides. There also wasn't really that much to do here. It made me get bored quite quickly. This was just basically before there was really video games, or you couldn't really play them online. So obviously you get quite bored and you didn't end up doing much else. The only way that you could get around was by using your pedal bike. I don't have an issue with this. I actually have quite a nice one, and I was really happy for having it. At the time, my brother would come with me sometimes when we'd play. Basically, we just agree what time we wanted to meet up at and just call each other on the house phones and then go outside. So it was pretty common for me to make my way across to the other side of town to play with some of my friends and just hang out there and relax generally. You know, basically just have a good time together. These are pretty good days. I absolutely love going to the store to get the big bottles of Pepsi. This is when you had them in the glasses, and I thought that was kind of cool. It was something that I always looked forward to. To be honest, I'm not sure how that I didn't end up with diabetes because how bad my diet was. I just constantly ate bad food, but that was fine. While we were playing there was always rumours about some kind of weird house and some weird cave accompanying it that nobody could ever seem to locate. But we'd hear rumours about this off a few other people, and in fact actually some adults that warned us against going there. They said that if you ever see the old burnt out house or that cave, don't go into it. I mean, firstly, the way that you had to get there was through an area which flooded very often. When you walked through it, it honestly looked like an atomic bomb had hit the place. There was all kinds of downed trees and stuff over there, and all kinds of other things that you obviously couldn't move. It would actually make it a really dangerous crossing too at the same time, which is one reason that you didn't really want to go there. They did have one log which had actually been cut down and made into some kind of bridge. The funny thing is, it didn't have barriers though on either side, so you could have easily fell. Not like the drop was very big, but I guess maybe in winter it could have been a lot more dangerous. However, we would so often go across there and just have an explore. I mean, you know how it is, when you're young and you've got that inquisitive nature, then anything like this you kind of jump at, just to get out there and have some adventure. We were so bored other than this. I mean, we had some sports like baseball and stuff which we would play, but we didn't do it too often. Thing is, there wasn't that many places that we could go and play it really. Where I lived, they had this really stupid habit of locking up everything really early. I mean, basically they'd close it a second that you'd got out of your school, and then it was dark, so there wasn't much you could do. The ones that were actually open also kind of had a way of attracting weirdos and dodgy people. You know, like the people that just let their dogs run wild and chase absolutely everything and made no effort to call them back, or just the drug dealers, just not a nice place. Especially not where you'd want to go when you were young, even though there was quite a big group of us. So anyway, we like coming to this place for a number of reasons, but the main one was just to get away from everything and just have some fun together. We were always trying to look for that place though, but we could really never find it. We thought it was just rumours and that maybe this never existed. So we're all playing out here one day when one of us says, yeah, you know that cave? I think I know where it is. And basically we're following him. I actually had to bring my bike, and so did a few others of us as we went further into the woods trying to locate it. It's not really easy to pass through here though, to be honest, because I don't know what they were, but some kind of plants, like, you know, the ones with the little thorns and stuff, and the ones that sting you. I don't know what they're called, but they're on either side of us, other than the big trees, were the only thing that was safe from this, so it wasn't very nice passing through here. Luckily I had long socks on, so it didn't get my ankles, but I knew some of my friends were suffering. They actually try and drive on their bikes through it, but it's too exhausting, so it wasn't really the best of places. But we had faith in him, and he keeps on leading us on this adventure. Now, none of us were actually entirely convinced that he was going to be able to find it. I've heard so many stories of similar things off of other people before, saying that they've got a friend who can show them where something is and it doesn't come true. But I don't know. Just seeing the new scenery actually made it relatively interesting. It was kind of like bright, but not too bright, if that makes sense. Like, you know, not when the sun's setting, but when it's cloudy and it's hard to tell exactly what time of day it was. Well, it's just like that, but we keep on going. We do this for quite a long time and we don't really seem to be getting anywhere. We were going so far now. Well, eventually we come up to an area which is much more rocky. Oh my god, what if this guy's actually right? I seriously didn't know what I'd do if we actually found this place. I mean, I was going to be too scared to go in truthfully. I could already feel my little heart pounding, and I was actually nervous about this. I didn't want to let on to the others, but I remembered thinking to myself that what if we actually have to go in this cave? It's not like any of us had torches or lights or anything, so we're not going to be able to see too well. And we come up to a Y shape in the road. We can either go downhill or across some bridge, and my friend actually stops for a while telling us that, well, he can't quite remember what way it is. We kind of looked at each other confused. It actually didn't dawn on us at the time, but we're very lost now, and we're going to have an issue actually getting home if we're not careful. But my friend would not stop going on about how that we're going the right way. So we eventually decided to go across the bridge. The main reason for that is that it's easier for us to go across on our bikes when my friend stops. He says, "Hey, look at that," and he turns and sprints on the other way until he jumps on his bike, and a few of the other guys all ride on their bikes trying to get out of there. Yes, they played the abandonment trick on me. They've took me out here, and they thought it would be funny just to ride off and just leave me on my own here. I could have easily caught up with them, but I just couldn't be bothered. I don't know why, I just basically turned and watched them going away. So off they went, and I just sat there, just taking it all in for a minute. Now, a lot of you might have thought that I was panicking, but I just wasn't for some reason. Now, I was left with some kind of ultimatum. I had to either press on alone or just head back to the relative safety. And probably for the first time in my life, I decided to be brave. I think it felt kind of nice to be on my own out here, so I just started driving very slowly on my bike, going across the bridge. I was taking advantage of the fact that I could drive along some flat ground and not really have too many issues here, so I do so. I'm doing it for a while and I eventually come up to an opening with lots of rocks everywhere. This is great, I think to myself. I'm now at a place where that I can ride my bike really easily, so I start doing so. I'd actually never really driven on rocky places like this before in my life, so I thought it was really cool to be able to do it on my bike. It looked really beautiful here. Now I've got some water on me, so every so often I'm just drinking that and periodically going to the toilet. I've probably drank too much water, but I like the fact that it's making my backpack less heavy. At the time I thought it could make me go faster, and I get up to an area that seems oddly familiar. I don't know why that is. I've not been here before, but I seem to know what way I'm going. I rest for a moment and notice something odd. There's some kind of markings on one of the rocks close to me. It kind of looks like if you draw stick figures with their hands up in a Y shape, There was about 8 of these figures there, then a much larger one further off onto another rock. I think this is odd. I run my hand along it and can see that it's been there for a while. It's clear that it's been pretty well weathered since it was first put there, and I think this is kind of cool. I've not really seen much like this. Then I get a fright as I turn around and I go off balance. My bike has kind of went out from underneath me and I start falling with the bike. I'm still riding it, but I'm gaining momentum and my brakes don't seem to be working. This happens for probably about 10 seconds before I finally lose control and slam into a rock which throws me off my bike. I get up and I turn round and start panicking. My bike is ruined. My very front wheel has entirely broken. It's really dented, almost as though that you took a big sledgehammer and smashed it as hard as you can. And there was no way I was going to be able to use it unless I become a tricycle expert. I was in big trouble now. My mum was going to kill me. She literally just brought me it. I love that bike so much. It took me a while to calm down from this actually, and I start telling myself that it's going to be okay. Just keep going, just keep going. So now I continue on foot, which probably wasn't the best of ideas. But like I said, I seemed to know which way I was going. For some reason, I just instinctively knew that if I kept going down, I would probably get to this cave. That was weird. I sat there for a while, and I can see what I think is one more person near the mouth of where I think the cave might be, and then another appear. I'm actually really far away, but I decide just to stop and observe them. I really can't see. I try to cuff my hands to get a bigger view, or just to see what else is going on around myself and block out some of the sunlight, but it doesn't make much of a difference. So I just continue walking down the rocky trail. This is actually a welcome relief from the other area of which I was walking upon. It's a lot easier travelling down here, and I feel okay. I was really bummed out about my bike though. I just can't stop thinking about it. It was so perfect. I just loved that thing. I knew too that it was going to be a while before I could get another one, so I'm pretty deflated now, but I just keep going. I suddenly realised why I seem to know which way to go. I think it's all of the stories, all the way people described it is just like this, almost down in some kind of valley of such with rocks on either side of you, and the cave almost perfectly waiting for you in the middle, just tempting you with its calls. So I keep going now further and further, and it becomes more bright. I'm glancing up occasionally, trying to see what's going on, but I can't see any more movement. I do notice what appears to be some kind of orange tent though, and a green one, which might be a rock next to it. This is on another hill a bit further away. I remember the only logical possible explanation to this is that some other people have went here to explore just like I did. And in my young mind I think, yeah, they're going to be excited to see me. Now I do notice something that I can't be sure wasn't a figure of my imagination at the time, but I'm almost certain that one of the figures seems to make a Y pose, very similar to what I'd seen before. It was really weird. It was literally just like what I'd seen on the rocks. I can only see the one figure at the time, but I think this is quite weird. I think maybe they're just doing it for, I don't know, I want to find out. I have to have a battle plan now. I decide the best thing to do is go up towards where the tents are just to have a little explore and figure out what they're doing. Because even though I was naive, I wasn't entirely unsensitive to danger. My mum would argue that this isn't the case, and she still would now, but it didn't matter. I was there to investigate. So I kept on going. I'm not too far away from their tents, and as I walk closer, I notice that the wind starts picking up. Now, I've noticed that this isn't the only time this had happened. There was a few other times that the wind had picked up all of a sudden when I was out here like this, or at least on my own in the woods, and it was definitely odd. It kind of sounded like I was going up a mountain a bit, which is bizarre because there was no wind up until this point. I'm now going through an area which brings me closer to the woods and closer to the cave. I actually decided to follow the harder path which would lead me to the tents. I can make them out more clearly now. One is definitely orange and the other's kind of more hidden. I don't know if it has a camouflage pattern or if it's just green, but it's very difficult to see. I can only really figure out that it's a tent because of its close proximity to the other one. I decide to go into quiet mode now, basically not walking on the rocks making sounds. I was quite small then, so I'm not really bothered about standing up. I knew I could crouch down for a little bit. I suddenly hear some kind of sound. It sounded like a metal gate opening and it really scared me. I actually duck down and hide under a tree when I hear it. I waited here for probably about 5 minutes or so, looking around trying to see if there's anybody else here but me. I don't see anyone. Actually, it sounds more like a chain moving now that I hear it once more. So I just stop and wait. I'm really not sure what this is. I'm inquisitive but more scared, so I just stayed there for a while. About 20 minutes or so pass when I eventually decide that it's in fact safe enough for me to leave my retreat, and it's not moving once more. So I'm making my way out and I get closer to the tents trying to be really quiet, and I notice the tents moving. I think, yeah, they've probably only just moved here or something and not really set it up properly, but I can't be absolutely sure. So I just wait and wait and wait, until eventually I notice something. The tent looks like it's in horrible condition. It looks like it's seen lots of storms. I now stand up and stop crouching as I'm trying to see it better, and I make my way closer to the other tent. That's odd, that looks exactly the same. I can actually see parts of it moving in the wind, almost in sync with the wind I can hear from being slightly further away. So now I go closer and closer until I can see that nobody's around. I feel confident enough to just walk normally on the rocks now, and I edge closer and closer, slowly creeping up to them. I go to the orange tent first, and this thing doesn't look like it's in good condition whatsoever. I can see it more so now. I crouch down and poke my head into the tent. Through that hole, can see no one, just that this thing was abandoned long ago. For some reason this puts my mind at ease and I feel comforted by knowing this. I now turn around and go up to the green tent. I get a little bit closer to it and I realise I can't see into this. I have to open the zipper. I go to do so and the door's already opened. It smells really bad in here too. I only looked for a second, but I can see no one's in here, so I stand up with the sound of the wind all around me. That's really weird. Why would people have tents set up here and just seem to leave them like this? The first one didn't look like it was too cheap either, so I think this is a bit weird. Well, anyway, I've got to get to that cave. I stand up for a moment with the wind in my ears and I just take a second to think, do I want to do this? Well, yeah, I decide that I want to. I've got to see what it is. I've got enough time in the day to just make it back, and the sun's come up now, and I feel more confident. I'm constantly looking out for different people, by the way. I probably should have mentioned this more, but I was being incredibly vigilant at the time of this. So I keep making my way down, and there it is. The cave. Wow. Beautiful. More pretty than I expected it to be. It looks very warm and inviting. I spend a while trying to figure out if I should definitely go or not. I realise that I'm probably not going to be able to see too much, and I quickly look around for my backpack. Oh yes, I think to myself as I realise that I have a lighter in the pack. I didn't smoke or anything, just sometimes we'd like to make little campfires on our adventures, and I had it for this. Great, and that thing was almost full. I tested it out and I accidentally burned myself. I realise I'm going to have to be careful or not do it when I'm actually outside in the wind. I take a look around one more time just to make sure nobody else is here, and then I notice it again, more strange markings on some of the rocks close to here. What is that? I just don't know why I keep seeing them. It seems weird that they're all leading up to the cave. I'm stuck here pondering why this would be here when I hear the wind in my ears once more. It kind of snaps me out of it, and I run my hand along it again. I don't know why, maybe it was OCD or some kind of habit, but I do so, then decide that I should just keep pressing on now, and be strong. I start slowly making my way towards the cave, and my feet feel incredibly heavy. I've got the lighter in my hand. My hand's quite cold from gripping it so much. I think I stopped the blood flow, so I stopped doing that after a little bit. I start making my way towards the mouth of the cave when I see something further in. I don't know exactly what it was, but I can definitely see something there. Maybe it's some kind of glowing mushrooms or something, or fireflies. I don't know. It's definitely something with a faint glow there. So I step in, and I can hear what sounds like water dripping. This gave it a really creepy sound, especially mixed with the sounds of the wind outside. I'm gonna keep going, but it definitely felt odd. It kind of felt like you put me into the scene of some kind of haunted house or something, or you know the movies where the world's ended through, I don't know, atomic bombs or something, and you're out in a wasteland and the explorers just come outside? Or I don't know if any of you have played the Fallout 3 game when he just leaves the vault. It was just like that. It was just kind of weird. I suppose it did look a little bit like it if I think of it now. But I decided to go in. I don't flash the light immediately using my torch. I thought I should let my eyes adjust a little bit. I still had some senses about me. I take my steps now, in sync with the dripping of the water in the background. Drip, 1 foot, drip, another foot, and so on. I'm just constantly doing this, trying not to be noticed. I now realise that I need to flick on the light because I've just walked into a rock and I'm scared I'm gonna hurt myself. Okay. I slowly raise the lighter up with my hand trembling a little bit and flick on the light. Nothing changes. I can see that there's something along the sides of the walls. I don't know what it is, actually. Maybe it's like slime or something, but it's almost like a strange liquid which is a little bit reflective. The cave seems really dark too. I mean, it doesn't match the outside rocks which are white, it's really dark. The only reason I could really see where I was going is because of the reflections of this. I realise now that I'm going to have to keep my lighter on, which is okay. I just set the flame to the brightest setting, and I start making my way forward. It was actually getting too hot for me, so I decided to use part of my jumper. I know that's a stupid idea because it could have set me on fire, but I wasn't thinking straight. I can't see anything glowing now because where I'm going. It's hard to describe it, but it's kind of like I could only see maybe 1 or 2 feet in front of myself, if that. I knew I was definitely progressing the right way because of the dripping sound going on every so often, getting louder. But that wasn't comforting. Then, I hear a sound again, kind of like a metallic one. It sounded like a heavy chain swinging. That's odd. I drop down very quickly, turning off the light as I do so. I couldn't be certain if it was because of the wind or not, but it was definitely odd, and I don't know where this is coming from. For some reason I get it in my head that now I kind of want to get a move on to try and make my way away from whatever this thing is. So I quickly flicker on the light again, and I can see the faint glow of something. It's not too bright, and I presume that it's going to be a big column of glowing mushrooms or something. I don't know. So I make my way closer and closer. I realise that because of the way the rocks are, I'm not going to be able to see it until I'm right there. It was like looking down into something, but you've got rocks obstructing your view. So I go a little bit further, turning off my light for a second so I can feel along the walls. They're very cold and slimy. It doesn't smell bad, so I've not got an issue doing so. I now get to the corner and decide to flick on my light, holding it out in front of me, extending my hand. I don't know why, this made me feel more safe for some reason. I felt like, well, if they can see my hand first, if there is anyone in here, they're going to react to it or say something, so it gives me an extra second just to run. But that doesn't happen. I did so for about 4 seconds before waving my hand around, thinking that maybe I could taunt something, but nothing happens. Okay, let's go. Well, I turn off the light for a second and I realise that it's glowing brighter now, these mushrooms. Then, I come around the corner and I'm amazed to see so many of these different mushrooms everywhere. There was probably about 7 or 8 different sections of it, and I can't make out exactly what it is at first. I flick on the lighter again, and I realise that they're all connected together. I hold my lighter up towards where some are, and then I realise it's got a different shape, which seems somehow familiar, but I don't know how to describe it. It takes a second, but I realise that these seem to be bones, which are somehow glowing very slightly. It almost looked like if you put the glow-in-the-dark paint off of a watch, which was really fading away onto them. And I can't make out what they are. I do something probably stupid, but I didn't know what else to do. I take out some of the scrunched up newspaper that we used to use before to make fire, and some other things. I actually had quite good materials to make a torch because of having firewood and things like that. So, in the dark, I managed to set this up and tie everything together with the newspaper to make a big torch. It takes a while and I can't seem to set fire to it, until eventually, boom, off it goes. Now it takes about 2 seconds as I kind of blind myself as I was staring straight at it, and then I illuminated the whole room. I'm now stood, almost surrounded by 7 or 8 skeletons, all turned to face me. I can now see that only one of them has a very faint glow, the others are barely at all, and I'm just stuck in a trance there. I wipe up my eyes quickly and slap my head, probably about 5 or 6 times, starting to slowly panic. What the heck is this? I've never seen skeletons before in real life, so I don't know why they're all like this. Some of them are just piles in the corner, but some of them look like they've been propped up to look like they're actually people. I, for some reason, just stayed here for about 1 or 2 minutes, just taking it all in. The cave actually goes on even further when I hear the metal sound again, from now even deeper into the cave. That was my cue to get out of there. I'm very scared that something's going to come from deeper in the cave, so I start moving backwards very slowly and very carefully, feeling along the wall. I trip myself over and out goes the light at the same time. Oh, come on, you've got to be kidding me, I say to myself, as I turn around, not really able to see now, fummaging around for my lighter. Eventually, I'm able to find it, and I'm feeling along the wall. I keep expecting to hear the metallic sound behind myself again, but I don't hear much of anything. I don't know where my torch has gone, so that's really frustrating. I wish I actually had a flashlight, an actual source of light that wasn't so basic, but I didn't think to. I can now see the mouth of the cave, and I start making myself more and more confident, trying to talk to myself positively in my head. As soon as I get to a part that I'm in a clearing, I sprint out of there. I don't know why I felt so scared. Probably because I've never been in that situation before, but it was weird. I felt fear in reverse. Maybe it was my body taking a while to react to what had just happened. But I was more scared running than when I was actually there. Would you believe it? So I decided that I'm going to run just the exact way that I've come. Luckily, this part is downhill, so I don't have too much of an issue with it. I didn't look around, I was just more focused on the ground. It was almost like everything in my surroundings went blurry except for what was directly in front of me, and I keep up the pace. I'm running, and now I'm almost about halfway to where the ground level's out again, and I have to go back uphill. I stop for a second before sprinting and turn to look, and I can see the figures once more. It kind of looked like two ants because where I was, but they're at the mouth of the cave, and you can see that they're searching for something, almost like when you've just disturbed someone and they're trying to get their bearings about them. I take a deep breath and start sprinting. This is all the fuel that I needed. Now I am religiously looking over my shoulder watching them as they grow further and further away, becoming smaller and smaller. Now the last thing I could see of them is that they both went back into the cave. God, what have I just discovered? What have I just unearthed, I think, as I'm making my way back now. I was actually really scared when I see the markings on the rock that I'd seen before again. It kind of gave me a surge of adrenaline as I realised that everything was linked somehow, and I didn't like it. I luckily still have a little bit of water, but drink it too fast and it actually makes me vomit a bit. I was so scared I didn't even stop to do this. I did it on the go and keep going. I don't know where my bike is, but I was probably too scared to notice it, as I'm now making my way through the forest. It was pretty tough going, but I didn't feel too much pain at the time. My legs were definitely starting to get more numb now, as I keep going. I make my way back into the bigger part of the forest that I was familiar with. Now the sun was still shining quite high in the air, and I think that gave me some form of confidence knowing that I'm not out here in the dark. So I keep on going until eventually I get up to where the familiar area is, and I'll be able to make my way back home now. As I get there, I realise that none of my friends are there, and I can't believe that they've abandoned me like this. I can't believe what I'd seen. I eventually make it to the relative safety of a little bit of civilization, and I'm trying to keep up kind of like a fast walking pace to get back home. I actually hear a cop car, and for some reason it made me panic. I thought somehow I'd trespassed and they were looking for me, so I actually ducked down waiting for them to go. I say to myself, come on man. I almost felt like I was on some kind of secret mission, just trying to get back out of here. Well, eventually I make it back to my home just in time for dinner. I now have a new danger and fear. My mum. What's she gonna do when she realises the bike's gone? She says, hey, where's your bike? And thinking on my feet, I said, oh yeah, Matt's got it. I gave it to Matthew and his brother for the week, and she says, oh, that's so kind of you. And I didn't say much of anything. I just ate my dinner and then went straight up to bed. I could tell I was exhausted, but I didn't know how much so. I actually slept through until maybe 1 PM the next day, so I got over 12 hours sleep and I felt good for resting. It's probably been about 20 or so years since this experience, and I never actually found out what was in those caves. Whether they're actually real skeletons or not, or why one of them seemed to be glowing, or who those people were. I ended up never going back to that area once more, but for all I know they could still be out there, and something horrible could have happened. I don't sleep easily at night, and sometimes I just can't stop thinking about it and it makes me panic. This occurred when I was about 15 or 16. I was also with a friend of about the same age and his dad. We were exploring the woods behind our houses. We lived in the same neighbourhood. We went back into these woods many times to hike around and play paintball. One day though, we decided to go a little deeper in the woods just to check it out. A little background is that this is an old forest growth / protected wetlands area with a few square miles that are surrounded by roads on all four sides, located in the northeast United States. For a while, we were wandering along. It was mid/late spring, so the forest is pretty lush and green, when one of us sees a small patch of white coming through the woods. I mean, it stood out quite easily in contrast to the green leaves, so we decided to investigate, and the three of us headed off in directions towards this mysterious white spot coming through the leaves. If you've ever walked through dense woods, you'll know how difficult it is to go in a straight line because of fallen logs and brush. Anyway, we keep walking towards this object for what seems like a while, but this object still hasn't come into focus. It looks like it's a white blob, and it's just getting further and further away from where we spotted it. We didn't think too much of it at this point, or at least I didn't, and continued walking in the direction of this thing. It must have happened 2 or 3 times that we'd walk towards this thing for a few minutes, stop and notice that we aren't getting any closer. Now by this point, I think there was a little tension building, but nothing out of the ordinary. At some point though, as we're getting closer, we do notice the object is starting to fill out. We can clearly see now that it's a tiny white house on a hill. I'd say the structure was about the size of a shed you might keep your lawnmower in. We were excited because how often do you come across something like that? It's still a little ways away, but again, very obvious that this little white house is what we had seen and were walking towards. So we continue towards the little house, and we lose sight of it momentarily as we go up over another hill, but as soon as we come to the top of the hill, the house is gone. Now we're really confused and both look at each other but keep walking up the hill that we've seen the house on. This last part happened pretty quickly. We get to the top of the hill, still looking at the other hills close by to see if maybe we just turn around or something and we'd see the little house, until one of us noticed an old foundation at the grounds where there obviously a house had once been. The shape of the foundation was exactly the size of this mysterious vanishing white house. I barely had time to notice the foundation when all 3 of us heard a growl, which sounds like it's getting louder until it's almost as loud as a chainsaw. Nothing was said, but the 3 of us, including my dad's friends, all sprint out of the woods in the direction that we've come. I don't recall ever discussing what happened to the 2 other friends I was with that day. Since this happened, I tried looking on Google Maps for some kind of indication that the house was there, but it's just a forest which is too thick. About 1.5 years ago, I told my brother what happened and we went back into those woods looking for the house's foundation, but I didn't find anything. Although, our search wasn't very thorough though. It was winter, so it's pretty cold and had snow on the ground. But it'd be hard to pick out where the house was meant to be because of the snow. One of the weirdest stories that I've ever heard happened is not my own, but my father's. My father works as a forest service worker, and he had many weird encounters over his years. This one in particular gave me chills all throughout my childhood, and it made me constantly just question things. Now, I'll tell this exactly how my father's told me and how that he's wrote it down for me, so sit back and enjoy. I think it's truly bizarre. Now, to start out, everything's going pretty well in life. I'm happy and my wife is now pregnant. Now this is going to be our 2nd child. We already had our other one who's about 1 now, and we're really excited to have a 2nd. We had a boy and we were hoping for another girl. It turned out that we had another boy, but that was just as much joy into our lives. Those who haven't experienced parenthood don't understand how it changes your life sometimes, and how it changes your approach to taking risks. I know that I certainly had the same feeling too. Now where I was based at for my job, I didn't really encounter anything too heavy. I hadn't been working this role for that many years and there was other more experienced guys out there. In fact, a lot of the time I'd actually get quite frustrated because I really truly wanted to do more, but I just wasn't able to. Sometimes there would be things that the other guys would know that I could do, and they would just rush off to do it before I had the chance to, and it was so frustrating. I enjoyed being out there, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of stuck doing more computer stuff and just, I guess, the boring things. Now, at this place, I knew that I could progress, but it was going to take years. They basically offered me all the training and everything, but my god, it was slow. The thing was, I was probably smarter than all of the people there, just not being given any opportunities that I needed to progress. It was almost like they'd given me this form, and it said everything I needed to do, but there were holes in it that they couldn't see, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I was quite tempted to join the Navy. I actually wanted to become a Navy SEAL at the time. It wasn't really possible because of some of the injuries I had, but I know that if I really pushed myself, I probably could have overcome them. But the problem was, even sometimes when I was doing this job, even just hiking around and doing my normal things, I would have a pain that I couldn't seem to stop from the bottom of my foot. I actually still have issues with it today. I'm not quite sure why it started, but yeah, it's just something I get on with. So on this particular day, it was just the same. There was more exciting call-outs and things to go and do, but literally before I could even get to the radio to say I would do it, someone would say I'm on it and would already be up there with their coffee in their hand, taking the last sips of their coffee before flying on out the door and to go and have all the fun. Yeah, it kind of really sucked doing this, but I guess it gave me more time to think and just relax a bit. The problem is, if you're like me, that time very quickly lends to boredom. I started going through some of the records and some of the reports. I basically had to reorganize them because some people in this office area, they would just throw everything onto a desk and not do anything. They would only look for items if they needed it, which of course is a very stupid idea and wastes everyone's time, but back in my day, I guess that's how it was. So I start reading through some reports. There was a few pretty creepy things on there. Some people would say that they had a feeling, like an intense feeling of fear that they couldn't describe, accompanied by a knocking on some of the trees. They were never able to locate the source of this sound, and they thought it was just animals, but it came up quite often over the years. Then I heard a really strange one. Apparently, there was a ranger that worked here, and a lot of the other people thought that he was going crazy. I was reading a second-hand account of what had happened to him. Apparently, something had spoke to him and told him the future. Weirdly though, when I looked back through another account, which was more recent than that one, some of the things that he said actually come true. And the person making the report actually noted that and how weird it was. Upon further investigation, it turned out that this person thought that he had spoke to beings or something. I don't know, kind of like aliens? They didn't describe it very well, just very vaguely. Now it seems like many of these cases were dismissed. There were other weird things too, like a Pacific area where you'd feel very hot. Completely unnaturally, to the point that you'd actually question if there was some kind of hot spring there. Or something weird that shouldn't have been there, but again, they could never find the source of it. The thing that made this even more bizarre is that eventually the plants and trees and everything in the area would start to die, so you basically knew for certain that something was definitely off there. Now I decided that I had to get out and do the very minimum just to not be in the office, and that's what I did. I remembered setting out and I was being a little bit more paranoid than normal. I think all these stories were just playing in my head. I remembered I kept thinking that I saw something walking through the tree line above, ahead of me, always maintaining the higher ground. It kind of just trailed alongside me. It's really hard to describe, but was truly creepy. Now I don't know what it was, but I think it was some kind of large animal there. Not big enough to be a bear, but certainly weird. I did think maybe it was a hiker out there, but it wasn't possible. I thought that was bizarre. I remember thinking to myself that you've just learnt the power of human potential in the mind, and it was pretty scary to me. Now, life goes on. We probably get to about a month or 6 weeks in, and again, they're just not training me properly. It's kind of really annoying because they'll complain at me for doing something when it's exactly how somebody's told me to do it. And they'll say, oh no, just do it confidently. But then they'll say, why did you do that? and you'll explain that's how you were trained, and they wouldn't seem to listen, and it was kind of like a hostile group. I didn't end up staying there for too long, but I'll get to that later. So what do? Once again, get reserved to balancing the books and just doing the normal work. Now this is actually at a time before we had computers, so it did make days very boring too. The problem I found is that some people just did not have good handwriting. I've never been the best at reading others' handwriting, but especially in these situations, my god, it was like some of these people had honestly made an effort to write as illegible as possible. And again, if you can't read it, they complain, so I kind of become an expert of reading these things eventually. And again, every so often there's weird reports. I realise too, quite often when it's recorded, people just think, oh, it's the other guy not paying attention. Maybe he wants everyone to look at him and stuff like that. At least that's on the report conclusion, but I had a feeling that something was off when I kept on seeing the reportings of some kind of beings out there. This spanned over a number of years too, and long before I was there. They all seemed to be described as relatively the same. They called them the forest walkers. Apparently they seemed to be quite tall, and they would walk in almost a weird limp motion. The weird thing is that they would be silent too, and if you approached them, weird things would happen. Some people said they felt almost like they were high. Others said that they would just know things they couldn't have otherwise and stuff like that. I don't know if I believe in the supernatural that much, or at least at the time I didn't, but I just considered that these were just things that happen when you've been out in the woods for too long by yourself. Now eventually as time increased, and I started complaining to the higher ups about the issues I was having, I started to get out more and do more interesting things. I even got to rescue a few people too, which is a really cool feeling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but there's something so cool about knowing that you preserved human life. You stepped in and you made a big difference and impact for someone. It's not something I'd felt before in other jobs too, so I was quite happy. Now, as I go out for a patrol one evening, I remembered having a strange feeling that the air was different. There was almost some kind of metallic smell that I couldn't quite describe. I was concerned that I had some kind of illness or that I accidentally got something on my nose, but no matter how much I wipe my nose, I can't seem to get rid of the feeling. And there was almost some kind of static in the air. You know, like when you have static electric and just before you feel the buzz, it was kind of like that. Now that's when I feel something. I can tell something's looking at me and I stop to turn around and see what it is. And then I can make out some kind of figure. It's probably about 20 feet away. It's wearing kind of like a dark coloured robe, but when it gets closer it appears more white. It walks with a weird limp and I can't believe my eyes. I actually rub my eyes quickly, not sure for a second if I'm dreaming, and it's gone. Now I think this is pretty creepy. I want to figure out what this is, so filled with excitement I actually jogged towards where it was. Now I couldn't tell you too much else about it, but just that it completely vanished. I probably spent another hour myself actually searching the surrounding areas just to see if I could find something, anything there to explain what I'd just seen, but alas, I come up blank. There's nothing there but myself. Now I'm actually a little bit irritated because I don't want to seem stupid. I really don't want to become like one of the people whose stories I've read, probably to be dismissed later on the same way that I dismissed some of theirs. But currently, it seems like I'm going to have no option but for that to be the case for myself. Yeah, it sucked really. I go back eventually and tell them what happened. Now, no one believes me, which is what I expected, and they say, yeah, you're too junior to be going out there and investigating things like this. I was pretty fed up again. I come from a role before where I was very well respected, and honestly, the way I was being treated was really annoying me. Now, a few months go on, and it becomes winter, and the going gets a little bit more tough really. It was pretty cold out there. I mean, uncomfortably so for myself. Now, I remembered on one particular day, I can't tell you specifically what I was doing, I just remember that I was out there, that I spotted something weird. I mean, really bizarre. There were these small figures, kind of limping around in the woods, again silently. Now I can't believe what I'm seeing. They're probably about 5 feet tall now, and in more of a white coloured gown kind of thing. Like I said, I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe it was something from Halloween, like decorations people put out there. And I actually wasn't too scared now. I was convinced that this wasn't actually a real thing or threat or danger, so I decided to sit back and very slowly follow these things. Now I didn't look behind myself, so there could have been more, but these things just kept on marching on, kind of down the path for a good 10 minutes longer. Now they never once seemed to notice me or so much as turn around, so again, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing, but I think it's some kind of Halloween decoration that someone's playing around with. I don't know, it could be a cult, it could be anything, but I'm not too worried. I don't know if it was the size of them or what, but I just wasn't concerned. Also, there seemed to be nature interacting normally around, so that meant that these things weren't a threat, at least I thought. So this continues on until eventually they all stop at something. I stopped too, and I can see about 4 of them. I was incredibly curious as to what they were looking at, but there's no real way for me to be able to see where I'm based currently. I get closer and closer and realise that I'm going to have to take the long way round now to figure out what it is. I decide to take a stealthy approach, and I try and walk very slowly through the foliage and get around. I do make it to a pretty good horizon, and I can see in front, and I still can't figure out what they're looking at. Now I'm sure these are people now, so I become a little bit more confident, and I walk down even closer to where they are. Eventually, I ended up crashing through some of the brush, and I decide that I'm going to be more present now. Obviously these people know that I'm here, so what's the point of trying to hide away from them? I go a little bit quicker now, and eventually go round to where I think that they're facing. And I can't see their actual faces. It's kind of just dark where their faces are completely covered up in something. Now, I crouch down to get a better look at them, and suddenly, I can hear voices in my head. They don't sound like voices I ever heard before too, and it's almost like my own voice but different. And I keep hearing different things that haven't happened yet. I hear about the birth of my son and know that it's going to be a boy. I know exactly what he's going to look like, how my career's going to go, what my wife's going to do, and some of the hardships that come up and who's going to pass away in my family. It actually makes me incredibly emotional at this point, and I almost feel like it's too much and start to cry a bit. I ended up kind of just becoming overwhelmed with my emotions, and I fall back into the dirt and stare up at the sky. The sky's very bright today, and it actually looks quite nice. After a moment, I kind of stop hearing the voices so much. They kind of just slowly fade out, like somebody slowly turning down the volume on a record, and I get up. I realise now that whatever these things are has gone now, and I'm just here alone, very confused as to what's actually just happened to me. I get up, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation for this. I ended up scouring around for probably another hour and a half until I conclude that nothing's here. That's when my panic finally catches up with me, and I decide that I need to get back as quick as possible. I start making my way there. I eventually get back to the station and immediately write down my report. I didn't speak to anybody else about what had happened, and that's when I'm confused. I suddenly realised that what I was reading was very similar to some of the reports of what had happened years before. The ones where that people had considered the guys that were reporting it a little bit crazy or seeing things. And for that reason, I actually took the report and ended up throwing it into the trash. I didn't want my colleagues to think I was crazy. I mean, I didn't like most of them to begin with. I knew that this was going to hurt me moving on to the other areas that I wanted to work, so there was going to be no benefit of me actually posting this. And I ended up moving on and working as a ranger in different areas and doing different kinds of roles too, even being a fire service worker. Now here's the weird thing. I only realised it much later, but I did have a son, and he looked exactly like I knew he would. The job that I changed into is exactly what I heard I would. My wife's role too. Also, some family members that died, they were the exact people who I was told would do so as well. Now suddenly I felt kind of a weird fear come over me, almost like a wash and flood of emotions coming back, realising that something had contacted me back then, and for whatever reason wanted me to know what was going to happen. I can't put my finger on why this happened or how it happened to me. I just know what I saw was real, and that I wasn't the only person that saw those kinds of things out there. Lots of my other colleagues had experienced some very similar things, and I just don't know what to make of it all. Now this is an experience which happened to me in the spring of 2018. I had a few which could be considered paranormal in life, but this was the most recent one and unnerving. I'm an avid outdoorsman and love to hunt and camp around the Francis Marion and Sumpter National Park. Back in 2018, I took my young son and dog out to a remote area in the National Forest to test out a new camper shell on my recently purchased truck. We found a secluded area of a dirt road, made dinner, and then packed it in for the night as soon as it got dark. Around 11 PM at night, I sat up and looked out the back due to the sound of a dog growling. In the distance, I saw what looked like hundreds of small white balls of light darting around, hovering a few seconds and slowly converging on our campsite. They just looked like dust orbs that you've seen on videos, but these were producing light in a completely dark forest. They then surrounded my truck, and it felt weird almost seeing like hundreds of them. They're like a soft white light and they don't blink. They just kind of float around. And then I finally worked up the nerve to open the truck and lit a lantern, and promptly they disappear. After turning off the lights and locking up, they come back. My son was fast asleep, thank goodness. I watched him until I fall asleep around 1 AM. The next morning when we tried to leave, the battery on the truck was dead. There wasn't any lights in the back cab where we would have used any power, and a week later we actually had to replace the electrical control module. Not sure what happened. I'd worked in my job for about 10 years and I really enjoyed it. Though eventually I did kind of get tired of seeing the same things. Now some of my friends said, oh, maybe you should get a different job and not work as the park ranger that I had for so long. But I don't know, there was something about it that I just couldn't seem to go away from. I wouldn't say I was necessarily drawn to work in the forest, but it just kind of connected with my soul, and I'd done it for a number of years afterwards. I'd like to share some weird things that happened to me with you guys, because I think it's important that other people know about them. Now the woods are pretty big, and we don't really know too much about what's out there. Now, keeping that in mind, I'm open to the possibility that some of what happened to me was just done by weird people, but at the same time, I'm not really so sure. Now, this particular event happened when I was relatively isolated too. I was basically patrolling somewhere, and I eventually got moved to go and inspect a cabin. The cabin was fine and we knew that. I just needed to stay there for a couple of days just to complete all of my checks. Now, This is something I thoroughly look forward to. It meant I could read and drink my coffee, and just bring a few newspapers up there with me, and just have a nice time being there on my own. I'm one of those people where it takes a few days of getting away before my mind completely opens and gets off of the tasks and things that are around me. I was having a hard time escaping from some of the stresses of life. I was staying strong and getting on with things, but I was going full speed ahead and not really taking any time for myself to sort things. So I could really do with this break. Some of my other friends at work there said they found the same thing too, but they did report feeling weird when they were out in the cabin. They said that they had the feelings of being watched. I didn't really take much notice of this because obviously, if you're out there in the woods, these feelings can come across very quickly. So it wasn't anything to be surprised about, really. I don't know. When you'd worked out there for a number of years, I guess you kind of got used to it all, so I wasn't really fazed. So I look forward to my journey. I remembered that on my last night before heading out there, things were pretty good, and some of the other guys there were just having a few jokes with me, trying to put me off the whole thing. They said, you know, there's Sasquatches out there. You heard about the bears that can come out of the trees and things like that, just joking. I didn't let it bother me though, and I said my goodbyes and set out. I remembered going home that day. I felt pretty comfortable and happy knowing that there was good things ahead of me. To be honest, my thinking was getting a little bit more negative at the time and I needed to get away. I won't go into too many details about things that was happening, but you could say it wasn't the greatest time of my life around now. I was using work as an escape really, which isn't the best of things, and yeah, everything worked out exactly the way that I wanted to. I'm now married with my wife and have a small boy on the way, and I'm really excited about this. I got another job that I absolutely love, just at the time those things seemed far away. When I get home I make sure that I packed up all of my coffee and everything else that I could need for this. I didn't have to bring that many things with me. I had some cookies and other supplies and snacks. You do get the supplies out there, but they're kind of more like military rations or MREs if you call them that. So I wanted to bring some other sugary things to make this more exciting. The cabin actually has a fridge and it's relatively well stocked, but sometimes the fridge will go out, and that's going to be annoying because you're going to have a very hungry few day tenor there, which I was trying to avoid happening to me. I remember driving over from the gas station. I actually took the wrong turn and go back to the normal place that I work, forgetting instinctively that I was supposed to be in the cabin, and I turn around. One of the rangers waves me away and pretended that he was saluting me like I was going on a military mission I wasn't coming back from. I did it back. I didn't really think much of it. As I'm driving, the trees are providing some very nice shade from the intense sunshine. Now it is one of those summers where the sky was beautifully clear, and it makes beautiful shaded areas in the forest. It was such a beautiful place to be. I really recommend anybody that hasn't been out there before to try it, because I think it's great. So I continue on my drive and there's some insects that are getting into my little truck, and this is annoying. One of them I couldn't get out for the life of me. I'm not sure whether it is a mosquito or what because I was concentrating on the road, but God was it annoying. I actually had my shirt off trying to bat it, but then I realised that I couldn't put my shirt back on again, and it was actually quite funny. Nobody really knows about this. This is the first time I've told people about this specific detail. Now, eventually I managed to get to where I have to park up and I dismount. I still don't know what insect had actually got into my truck. I just figure out that hopefully, after a couple of days of being locked in there, it will die. Or worse, it will have children, then I've got a new problem. But I'll worry about it later. So I get my box of things and everything and I start walking down there. Now again, the trees are absolutely wonderful. I feel really at peace and happy. This almost like every direction that I look in, there's nature all around me, and I couldn't feel more happy. I'm honestly beaming at this point. You can see the high rock formations all around me, and it looks incredible. It honestly looks like it's something out of a film. And I'll take my way across a bridge with a stream that once ran. Closer to the winter months, there'll actually be more water through this, but it's just become so dry that there's nothing there. Sometimes I wonder how the trees stay so strong and lavish, but they do. Now, after probably about 2 hours of hiking and seeing lots of dragonflies and other beautiful insects, I eventually make it to the cabin. And it looks pretty dusty. It looks like it's been coated by a sandstorm or something. It's a bit annoying because it means the other people that were there before didn't actually make any effort or progress to clean it off, and I find that quite annoying. It doesn't take any effort whatsoever for people to be courteous to each other and to make our lives easier, but hey, here I am. Now, I remember the first weird thing I saw is a turtle shell. There are no turtles that should be around here, but why is there a shell here? I thought maybe one of the other workers or hikers had left it here, but I don't know. Seems pretty weird. It was hollowed out too, which was especially strange. No skeleton or anything. So, I put the key in the door, put my things down and make my way inside. And I met with a beautiful smell of coffee. Not bad coffee, but some unopened ones that people have left around, and other little presents for me to find. This makes me very happy, and I start boiling the kettle. Now there's something wrong with the kettle and it seems to constantly boil, and I go to turn it off. As I turn around, I think I can see something in my peripheral vision, but as I look there I can see nothing. I presume that it was just my eyes adjusting from the bright going into the dark, and I don't think much of it. Though this time I'm a little bit more scared, and I decide to close the door behind me. I met with a feeling of peace, and the cabin's really nice. It's quite basic, but you have like a toilet area, a little kitchen area, and an area to sleep. It's kind of like a studio design, if you were imagining a modern apartment, where you've got one area sectioned off and everything else is in the same room. I don't have an issue with this though. I knew there wasn't that much water, so I have to really try and ration it. I don't have a clue when they last filled up the tank, and I don't want to be the person that gets left short of showers and things like that. Especially because of how hot it is out here, it can become really overwhelming very quickly, and I'm trying to avoid this. So I'm really having a great time at first. I decide to make some food and open up one of the MREs. After this, I drink my coffee and I have my cookies and I'm just relaxing. I know that I'm going to need lots of energy because I have lots of different areas to check. It's nothing too much, I just have to make sure that paths can still be travelled on and stuff like that. So I set out and do this. There's a really beautiful cool air as I set out, and it makes me feel quite at home. As I step out, I do realise that I can see something up ahead of me. It's on one of the paths that I have to make sure is clear, and I can see it's a little bit overgrown, but I guess that's kind of normal. Basically, as long as I could get through okay, it would be a pass. If not, I would have to try and clear it out myself or make a note of it so people could come out and clear it. I actually have a shovel with me and I want to attempt to fix some of this myself. Now, as I make my way through, I come up to a large tree that looks like it's covered in moss, but it's something slightly different. I'm distracted by this as I see something further. It looks like the silhouette of a person standing there. I don't think too much and think maybe, well, it's probably a hiker out here. I decide not to disturb or scare them. I think maybe if they see my shovel they might think it's a weapon or something from afar and become scared, so I don't make too much sound and just continue. I've decided that I should go around the path away from them so they don't really get spooked, and that's what I do. Now, eventually I have to loop back round, and I get to the other area that I need to check out. I go across another little path which takes me over a stream that once flowed. It looks really pretty once more. I then realise that I can still see the silhouette. I do think this is particularly strange because it doesn't seem to have moved. I'm not sure whether somebody's left a jacket there, and I decide to investigate. I follow up some steps, and I keep staring at this thing, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Now, as I'm approaching, I'm feeling completely relaxed. I think it's just the environment and not really taking too many notes of the situation, but I was maybe too cautious, free, and think that I probably should have had a better approach to this as I get closer. I can see something staring at me now. I say something because I can tell it's not a person, but it was pretty weird. It looks like a black sheet with some kind of mask up on it. I can now see that it's a hood. It's not a hoodie, but it's kind of flowing down. And I can see the base of it as a tree. Somebody's left some kind of drape over this tree, and it doesn't look normal. I get closer and closer, and I presume that somebody's left a tent up here. I think it's weird because it's black, and I think, why would you want a black tent? You're honestly going to get scalderingly hot. This is certainly not the kind of tent you want out here. And I then have to start making my way off of the path. I'm a little bit annoyed about this because it starts messing up my uniform, which I really enjoy keeping pristine. I do, however, eventually make it over to the back of it and go to grab it and pull it down, but it's on there pretty tight. I then take a step to the side and I can see a skull. I don't know what kind of animal skull this is, but it kind of looked like the Halloween scream mask that you see every October, but almost like a makeshift home one. This is pretty bizarre. I eventually pull and I'm able to tear this thing down. I go to touch the part of the skull that's on top of the tree stump, but I decide I should probably leave it there. As my hands are probably an inch away from it, I just hesitate. I don't know, it just felt weird. I look this thing in where its eyes would have been for a second and I get the creepies. I realise that I can probably just kick this down though, so I use my force and I'm able to make the tree come down. And I'm quite happy. It was probably about 5 feet up in the air, the stump of this tree. And I'm glad that I don't have to see it anymore. The last thing I want to do is forget it's there, then have an absolutely horrifying moment as I make eye contact with this thing again in the dead of night or something. But that's pretty weird. That shouldn't really be there. I presume that maybe somebody's done it for Halloween, but this is in nowhere near to October. I don't know, maybe it's been there for a while, but I think this is odd. I take a few looks around and I can't see anybody or anything else. I just remembered that my hands felt very sticky too. It was almost like tree sapling, but somewhat different. It wasn't like this thing was glued up here, but it was certainly odd. I look around in all directions, trying to see if anything else is out here, but I can't see anything now. I don't think there's anybody hiding away too, but I do really think this is especially weird. It's the first time in my career actually that I've ever encountered something weird to this degree. I decide it's probably nothing and say to myself aloud, come on, you're the ranger here, let's get on with it. And I continue about my way. I go up some steps and start clearing another path. I start shoveling, and as I'm doing so, dirt is getting stuck to my hands because of whatever kind of sticky substance is on that robe thing that I pulled down, or that tent. It's actually quite disgusting. I'm usually not that creeped out by things like this, but it really makes me feel weird. I decide that I should probably head back now, and I start doing so. Now, I'm not really proud of this, but I actually didn't do some of the surveying and clearing I was supposed to do for the rest of the day. I don't know, it was almost like something clicked in my head and I just couldn't do it. I kind of gone transitioning from being in the moment to being a little bit more cautious of everything, almost thinking more in philosophy about why was this here, what could it have meant. I head back and put the shovel down outside, and I go in and start washing my hands. I really struggled to get this stuff off, but I'm eventually able to do so. Then I notice annoyingly that I've used up quite a lot of my water to do this. I decide that I should wrap up my shovel in bandage so that way I don't have to touch it again, and make sure that I wear gloves if I investigate anything similar. So I actually use the rest of the evening just to listen to music on the radio and try and relax. There was something about hearing that voice in the cabin that really calmed me down. I actually have the door open now because it's so hot, and I just relaxed really. Yeah, I had more of a job to do, but in this moment I was a little frightened really. This goes on for the rest of the evening, and eventually it's time to get some sleep. I close the door, have the bandage on the shovel now, leaving it ajar to the door, and go out. I take one last scan of the perimeter and head back in again. I put my stuff to the side and decide to keep a knife near where I'm sleeping now. It's something I've actually never done before, and I realise why it's a stupid idea when I woke up the following morning and I nearly stabbed myself. Funnily enough, it's not far away from my neck, and I thought, wouldn't that be funny if I ended up getting myself like that? I radio in my findings from the following day, and I actually lied about what had happened and just said everything was normal, and I make myself another cup of coffee. The cup of coffee is kind of like my morning debrief with myself, where I plan out what I need to do for the following day, what I could do differently and what I could do better, and for today, it's to not get freaked out so easily by small things. That's what I say to myself. I do some positive affirmations and I get ready to head out again. Now, what's weird about this morning is that there's kind of a mist that's settled. It's not fog, but almost like a morning dew. But I haven't seen it out here before, and it makes the whole place seem a little bit Halloweeny and scary. I go to look for the shovel, and I can't find it. I look exactly where I placed it the following night and I realise that it's nowhere to be found. No issues, so I probably simply misplaced it, I say to myself. I press on now, looking all over for this thing, but I can't seem to locate it. Okay, that's certainly weird. Again, I don't think too much of it and presume that, I was tired. I probably just forgot it somewhere. And I head out. Now I have to go about 40 minutes away from where I am now to do this further maintenance work, and I go into a really beautiful area where the trees are tall and quite skinny. That has its advantages because I have quite a good horizon here, and if there is anything or anyone, I'm gonna be able to see them now. The trees are actually really tall. I think they're probably about 50 or 60 feet or even taller. It's really cool. Don't know how many years I've been here, but I really like it. Now the mist eventually goes and I feel a lot more confident being out here on my own. I have my coffee with me, but where it started to become more summery and hot as the days progressed and the trees aren't as thick here, I'm quite hot and start to overheat a little bit, so I resort to just sipping it slowly. I'm sweating quite a lot now. I don't feel like I need the energy though, I just like the taste of the coffee. So I continue this walk and eventually find a tree that's fallen down onto the path. It's not too big, but I should be able to clear it. I don't have the shovel, but I ended up using a big stick and I'm kind of able to plant it underneath and using the end of it to tether it out of the way. It only moves about a foot at a time, but my god is it loud. It sounds like a whole tree's fell, and it made me jump at first. I don't know how my stick hasn't snapped, but I continue this process when I hear something. There's kind of like the sound of rain, or maybe like lots of cups being thrown at something. That's the only way that I can describe it. Or maybe like someone was shooting ping pong balls off of the trees. It was weird. I thought maybe for a second I set off a chain reaction or something and some other trees were going down elsewhere, but I can't see anything. Everything is impossibly still for the sounds that I'm hearing, and that's especially bizarre. Now, I scour the area for as long as I can. I even go off onto the tree that I've just knocked down to get a better viewpoint, but I can't see anything at all. This happens for about 4 minutes before slowly fading out, similar to how the sounds of rain slowly go off into the distance as the clouds go away. But that was especially weird. I'm very drawn in to where the sound was coming from, and it's further up the path, so I now head up this way. I have my stick with me still because I knew it was strong. I say it was in case there was more trees to clear, but I was a little concerned now. As I'm walking, I see movement now up the hill through the trees again. It's weird, it almost looked like something was kind of floating through the trees. I can't really tell because how far away it was, but it looked like something quite big was kind of moving through them freely. Almost like it wasn't interacting with the trees, but more just the ground on the floor. Almost like it was in another dimension. I walk as quick as I can trying to get closer to whatever this is, but I seem to get further and further away. And that's when I stop. I'm drawn to the ground as I notice something. I think my brain realised something shouldn't have been there, and what do I see? The carcass of a deer. Now, it's not really the carcass, more the bones. But only the bones. It's almost like this was dipped in some kind of acid or something, because there's nothing else around it. I can't see any flesh, I can't see any blood, just a deer carcass somewhat perfectly in the middle of the path. I start searching now, trying to see if there's any other signs of anything or anyone that could have made this, but there's nothing. I look further and further, trying to see if there's anything similar, but again, I don't see anything. Annoyingly, it's my job now to move it out of the path, and I don't want to do this. I ended up prodding it with a stick for a while, probably about 10 times before I'm brave enough to actually just grab it and move it piece by piece off into the trees and the bushes. Now that was really weird. I remembered when I felt it too, it felt kind of chalky almost. Like too dry, like bone dry, but even more so. I don't know how else to describe it. The only thing that was making it wet is my hands that are sweating. I'm not sure if this is from the situation or just because of how hot it is, but I'm suddenly no longer feeling the urge to investigate further. I continue my surveying this time, and I realise that I forgot my stick. I look around and again, that was nowhere in sight, which is weird because I was sure that I left it next to me when moving the bones. Now eventually I come up to another clearing, and all is well now. I feel a lot better in this open space, just knowing what's going on around me. I finished the job for the day too, so that's a good sign that I can head back now and try and get back to some relative safety. So I turn away and start heading back in the direction and the path that I've just walked upon. Now I get back and I'm at the point where I found the bones, but I can't see them. I think maybe they've sunk down into the ground a little bit, but that's quite weird. I should still be able to see the bones, especially because of how white they are. It should stand out from the background, but they're not there. I just think it's a good thing that it doesn't have to scare anyone else, and I think, well, maybe some kind of animals wanted them for God knows what, and I start to head back. Now the hike back felt probably twice as long, which is another weird observation. Usually I know exactly how long I've been out for, but I check my watch and I have been walking for the same amount of time, and it feels dreadfully long. I'm also quite tired. I go back into my cabin and close the door, and I fell asleep pretty quickly. Actually so quickly that I didn't even eat or shower or anything. I just woke up the following day about an hour before my alarm. So I eat, I get ready and radio in. And I say this time that I did find some animal remains, but nothing out of the ordinary, and that I've cleared it. They say, "Mikey, great, good job, keep it up, not long now." I say thanks, and end the call. To be honest, I was relatively frustrated at this point because I've not really had the relaxing time that I'd anticipated, but I've still got a couple more days left, so that can come soon. So I get my things together, get ready, eat some donuts this time, which are actually on the turn. They don't taste that nice, but give me the sugar that I need to head out, and I do some extra work. Now, as I set out this time, I have to survey another area and make sure that there's been no fires here or anything. Apparently this particular area is quite susceptible to having forest fires, and we just have to make sure that there's nothing that could potentially be causing it. It could be trash that people have left behind, or illegal dumping. Believe it or not, people will actually dump things out here. How they get this far out, I don't know, but they'll bury things. But the problem is, it makes methane and other gases that are very combustible, and we have fires that are deep out here and quite hard to tackle. So I'm walking down the path, and in this area the trees are also quite long and thin, but the good thing about it is that it lets you see miles around almost, or at least 500 meters in any direction, so I'm feeling safe now. To be honest, it's quite overgrown again, and a lot of the bushes probably come up to half of my height. It's okay, it just makes it a little bit uncomfortable to trek through, but that's fine. Now, I get to the area that I need to survey, and I can't see anything there out of the ordinary. I do notice how the trees have suddenly got much darker now, and it almost looks like nightfall in this particular area. But that's not an issue, it just means that it's going to be a lot more cooler there, and it's going to be a lot nicer for me. So, on I go, much more braver than the last couple of days now, and I feel comfortable. So I'm mostly done now, and I take a few rests. I'm drinking water, and my canteen's actually running a little bit low. Normally this means I should just head back because dehydration is going to be really dangerous out here. But I continue onwards. I see a beautiful bird in this moment that I haven't seen before, and it distracts me from everything. I've never seen this kind before. It almost looks like a green parrot, but it's a little bit different. I notice it's interesting because in all my years of working there I've never seen it before, but that's fine. Now, I take a seat and I look up and notice something odd. It kind of looks like an owl at the top of a tree. It's quite high up, but it's a very weird shape. It almost looks like a dinosaur to me, and I think it's odd. I can also see partly through it, which I think is really bizarre. It's probably about 100 meters away, and really difficult to spot, but I do. I get out my binoculars, and I can't really focus on it that well. I know it's a bird, but it's really difficult to see exactly what kind of bird, and curiosity gets the better of me. When I was younger, I used to love going bird watching and looking out for animals like this, so I decided that I should investigate. The good thing is, it's on the path that I'm on, so I basically just have to follow it in a straight line to get to it, and that's exactly what I do. Now I get closer and closer, until I realise something odd. This is no bird, at least not no living one. Whatever this is, has died up there, and I'm looking at the bones. But again, there's no flesh at this, there's no blood, there's nothing. What only appears to be the skull and a few bones of something up the tree. How it was all held together, I'll never know, but I think this is really weird. I take out the binoculars and look even closer this time, and I soon realise that what I'm looking at looks identical to the remains that I'd found before. Now that's really odd. How on earth any animal or anything could have got up there is beyond me. It almost looks like you'd need a drone or helicopter to take it up there. It's really creepy to see. It wasn't moving though, it almost looked like the head of a totem pole with how perfectly it was stuck there. Wait, wow, am I getting scared now? I almost felt like I was in something's area and land, and it being up there was a sign that I wasn't supposed to be here. I try and mark down the exact location where I am, but I can't be too sure because I'm a little worried now. I decide to just forget about it and continue on the path and do the last parts of my surveying. I did these very quickly this time, and nothing out of the ordinary up here. I take a few seconds before I can actually turn around because I don't want to. I'm expecting to see something standing on the path staring dead at me in my eyes, but I have to be brave and turn back. I don't want to be stuck out here as nightfall comes. I turn around and there's nothing. I breathe out a deep sigh of relief and I start on the path and make my way forward. Now, I look towards where the tree is and it's still up there. It hasn't moved an inch, but I feel like my mind has miles away from the situation. I actually couldn't look at it other than that quick glance. I resorted to jogging past where the tree is. It's probably about 6 feet off of the trail, but I can't be sure again because I didn't take long enough to figure out exactly how close it was. I ended up jogging until I realised I have to stop because my eyes are starting to go a bit weird. Now, I start walking and I get to the other area where I can finish off my job for the day. The good thing about being out here usually is that you can finish the day pretty early most days and do what you want afterwards, but for me in this situation it wasn't a good thing. I'm walking as I notice some leaves fall and I get back to my cabin. Now back to my sanction and safety. It's the most relieved I've ever been to get back there in the time that I've been out. I decide that I need a sheltered day. I get in, I lock the door, close all the windows, and just have a relax. I fell asleep for about 2 or 3 hours and wake up again. I'm very dehydrated. I realise that after I'd been to the toilet and start drinking lots of water. I have a cold shower now to try and wake myself up. I finished writing up the reports of my day and findings. I actually decided to include it this time too. I thought something definitely wasn't adding up here, and it could have been chance that all these animal remains were out here, but I think it's very weird how there was no flesh and blood on any of it. I don't know what kind of animal or creature could be capable of that, but I know it certainly wasn't a hunter. Because A, they're not allowed out here, and B, how on earth could they have possibly got it up there without us realising? I don't know, but I guess I don't really want to know. I remembered that I couldn't even focus on reading, which was my attempt at getaways in situations like this. I just stare at pictures of some of the couple of days old newspapers. I'm not really sure what to do. Funnily enough, I actually started doing a crossword and it calmed me down a lot. I think probably all of my brain was being used, probably the parts that aren't normally used from being in dangerous situations, and it made me fly through that thing. Or maybe it was a distraction of it all, and escaping, I don't know. But I eventually drift off asleep. I wake up again and the sunlight hits my face, almost aggressively, and I wake up once more before my alarm clock. Usually this would never happen unless I was stressed out about something or if I had something important the following day. I eventually round my energy up and make my way out of bed, and quickly get all of my food in me and showered off, and I get ready for my day. My alarm clock then goes off almost in time with when I get a call from the radio. Now it was just a normal call. They're basically just asking how I'm doing, and I explain what's been going on. They actually take this quite seriously, and they're worried about illegal hunters in the area. But I explain, I don't think this is illegal hunters. I really think this is odd because there's no blood or anything. They also agree that this is a particularly weird detail of my endeavour out here so far, and they say just keep a note on it, and I start to get ready for my last day. I feel happy now and more confident knowing that my time here is now limited. So I head out and start my final day. Things are pretty normal, and I almost feel like the air tastes different. Everything feels more peaceful, and the usual sounds and surroundings seem to be as they were. Everything seemed a little bit too quiet for the last couple of days, and I honestly forget about what had happened. I make my way up one of my trails, and everything's lovely here. The trees are ones that I can see quite far along, and there's parts of them slowly falling down, and lots of plants are in blossom, and everything being in bloom makes it look so much nicer. The first weird thing I did see was a big spider on some parts of wood that I had to investigate and inspect, but it didn't jump on me, which is always a good thing, and it kept its distance, so I was happy. Now, I get towards the end of my day, and I'm feeling good. You know what I mentioned earlier about wanting to forget about all of the worries and stresses? That comes, and I have a really beautiful peace of mind moment where nothing bothers me. All of the stresses are gone, and I feel really happy out here. Now, I actually start to feel a little bit sad knowing that my adventure's soon going to be over, and I have to return back to the normal parts of my job. The aspect of being out here in the cabin away from everyone and everything doesn't come too often, so I take a few moments to try and appreciate it more. And the sun begins to set, and I head in now. I've completed my tenor here, and it's time for me to return in the morning. I start packing out all of my things so I can leave quickly, and I head off to bed. Now, I didn't fall asleep quickly and start doing another crossword. I actually think of trying to develop my own, then realise how boring I am, and eventually fall asleep. And I'm awoken. I hear the sound of knocking on the door. I say I'm gonna come, give me one moment, and start to find my things. They persist so, and I say louder, I'm coming, just give me a moment. It seems to go on constantly though, which I think is pretty weird, and it suddenly dawns on me, nobody's coming to relieve me. It's pretty late in the night time, and something's off. I get up, look out the window and can't see anybody. Still in a dazed state, I go outside and look around, and I think I can see somebody, but I'm not too sure. I presume that it's one of the other rangers there, and I say, hey, I'm gonna sleep a bit longer, let me just go to bed. And I go back in and fall asleep quite quickly. Now I'm woken up about 2 or 3 hours later by the same knocking. This time, my conscious brain slips in, and something doesn't add up. I realise nobody should be out here but me, and why would they be waking me up so early in the morning? I realise that was not a ranger who I thought I saw. I get up quickly, and the knock-in this time really haunts me. I still have my clothes on from before, so I don't need to get changed at all, and I slowly peer out the window. As I do, I notice a deer standing up on its hind legs staring straight back at me. It doesn't look like a normal deer though. It looks terrifying and menacing, like something I've never seen before. No animal that I've known has ever been able to do this before in my life, so what on earth am I staring at? I then let out a gasp, and this thing runs on all fours. It runs into the forest and kind of takes on almost a human shape, and eventually gets off into the distance. I was stark glued to that window staring for probably over an hour trying to see if it come back, and daylight now breaks. There's nothing there. It's just me alone in the woods. I think that I might have went into a state of shock after that, and I grab the things that I need and I start slowly making my way out towards where the back of the cabin is. I have to put something away, and as I'm doing so, I hear my name, Mike. Mikey, come here. Look, I need to show you something. It sounds just like the other ranger who I've been communicating through on the radio with. I say hello, then go to stop myself. This can't be Mikey. I then go back in and I radio in for Mikey, who answers. I say oh nothing and I'm coming back soon, and he says see you in a bit. I think maybe he was talking on the radio and I somehow left it on. I then go back out and start making my way through the forest, but then I hear it again. Help, please help. Mikey, I'm hurt, you've got to help me. That's when I realised something was way off. He wasn't out here in the woods. In fact, it's not physically possible he could have reached me here in this time. I then start to walk very quickly, and the voice, it goes away, but then it returns again, seeming to follow me. But this does not sound like a person though. It sounded like something trying to be a person. There were breaks in its voice and it just sounded off, where it would go deeper every so often. Mike, come here, please, I beg you. Followed by crying. The crying sounds followed me for probably another 7 minutes, until eventually I get further and further away from them, and I only hear weeping and the odd Mikey, sounding more and more desperate. I know for 100% fact it was not my buddy out there. This was something far worse and menacing. The relief I feel when I see my truck is something I can't describe. I throw everything in the back and slam the door. I don't know why I slammed it so loud. I think it was to let whatever was out there know that I was in safety now. And I start up and I make my way back. I eventually get back and I remembered the entire drive just feeling very weird, almost like I wasn't in my own body. I get into the station and guess what? My buddy's there. He was apparently calling out for me desperately in the woods. I say, hey, were you out there in the woods? And one of the other rangers looks at me weird. I say, I heard your voice in the woods calling out for me, but it wasn't you. I then start saying more of what happened, and one of the rangers who's a bit older looks at me and says, yeah, you encountered a skinwalker. I look at him like he's crazy. But he says, you know, they imitate voices. And for some reason I suddenly remembered the other detail, the weird looking deer thing I'd seen. I explained that I was very delirious and very tired and that I don't think it was anything. But he then explains that apparently this is exactly what they're supposed to look like. I then tell them that I'm never going back there again and that there were skulls out there that have to be investigated. He then says that he's going to send a few of the boys out there in a couple of weeks to figure it out. I say, weeks? Are you crazy? I say, they're going to be gone by then. He says, no, I'm not risking it, and looks very serious at me again. Now, it turns out that an investigation went out there to find the skulls, and you know what? They could never find a thing. Apparently some of the other rangers, when they're out there, heard other voices of who they thought were other rangers, even being myself, but apparently nobody was out there. Apparently the voices actually went on for the following months, before it wasn't heard again for the next 8 years, and eventually I left. Now, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that what I encountered was a skinwalker, but from how they described it and what I saw, I don't know what else it could have possibly been.